So every Disneycember I always find a theme to tie all the videos together, but the downside of that is whenever I do that, a lot of other movies are released and I'm not able to give them the Disneycember treatment. I mean, don't get me wrong, Disney has had its hand in a lot of things, TV shows and movies and animation of course, but as they continue to expand and keep buying properties, it seems like there's just so much Disney coming out all at once. So this year, I'm gonna make up for that. This year, it's by popular demand. That's right, there's no connecting themes, there's no one studio or one style of film we're looking at. All it has to do is have Disney's name on there somewhere and be requested by a lot of people. You name it, there will be animated films I haven't done yet, Pixar films I haven't done yet, Disney Channel movies, Marvel films, old and new, even films that just came out this year. Now like before, some of these I've discussed before with my brother Rob on Sibling Rivalry. So if you want a longer review of some of these movies and a different point of view, you can go and watch those. But I also like the idea of letting time pass, whether it be a lot or little, and seeing if they still have the same impact as when I just saw them. After all, the Sibling Rivalries are done right after we've seen it, so this allows me some time to collect my thoughts even more. It is so cool just to see how much bigger Disney is becoming. I mean, just when you thought they couldn't get any bigger, here they are owning all these different properties and studios, and for the most part they're turning out pretty damn good material. But again, we're here to discuss what works and what doesn't, what's timeless and what's immediately dated. And on top of that, what works as being timeless or dated and what doesn't work as being timeless or dated. So if there's ever a Disney movie, Marvel movie, Disney Channel original movie, Pixar film or whatever I haven't gotten to, this is your chance to see if I finally catch up with it. Sit back and enjoy, this is Disneycember by popular demand. There is absolutely no particular order in this at all, so I'm just gonna start with Pirates of the Caribbean Dead Men Tell No Tales. The fifth installment in what seems like a never-ending series, and I don't really mean that in the best way. This film was not a huge financial success when it came out, and you can kinda see why. I like the first Pirates of the Caribbean movie like a lot of people, and I stomach the other ones okay, but after a while you just kinda get sick of seeing them. Especially when nothing that new is being added. Jack Sparrow is back, of course, played again by Johnny Depp, and he's teamed up with the son of Orlando Bloom's character from the previous movies. Oh Christ, can't we just escape these characters? Okay, in all fairness, Orlando Bloom is not in this movie much, and Keira Knightley even less. But they're replaced with two bland, good-looking cutouts that they might as well just be Orlando Bloom and Keira Knightley. His son is the good-looking, dashing heartthrob who's in over his head, and his girlfriend is often told she has to be one thing, but of course she doesn't want to be. Like I said, it's practically the same characters from the other films. Bloom's son wants to find a way to break his father's curse so he can be reunited with him, and a scientist named Karina, who's confused for a witch way too many times to be funny, is trying to honor her father by finding the Trident of Poseidon. Wouldn't you know it, if the Trident is destroyed, all the curses of the sea are lifted, and yeah, you can guess why everybody wants to get it. But a ghostly villain, played by Javier Bardem, of course is after Jack Sparrow because he screwed him over in the past, just like all the villains of Jack Sparrow. And he also wants to find the Trident to possess its power. Are you interested? Even a little? If the answer is no, then this movie really doesn't do much to get you invested. I can't say this is an awful flick. I mean, it's not like there's moments where I'm saying, shut up, or this is so annoying, or anything like that. It's just kind of bland. Which is funny because if this movie came out 20 years ago, it probably wouldn't be. These effects would be seen as impressive, these designs creative, these characters and their relationships odd but fun. But because we have seen this so many times, it's just feeling formulaic. Johnny Depp's just running around acting like Jack Sparrow, and he does it fine, but why are we still interested in this? We've seen him do it in the other movies, and anything interesting that could be done with him has kind of already been done. There's only one moment that actually gave me new insight into his character, and it hardly has any words in it. He has this compass that he knows if he gives it away, it'll bring back Javier Bardem, allowing him to potentially hunt him down and kill him. He trades it, of course, for a bottle of rum, but he looks down at it and kinda smiles and says, "Pirate's life." Almost like he wants to be chased, he wants to be hunted down. That's just kind of the life he chose. That was kind of interesting. But aside from that one little moment, everyone just kind of stays in their usual roles, and they're not really as entertaining as they used to be. Sparrow's antics are getting tired, the young man and young woman are there to offset his goofiness. Even Jeffrey Rush, who's usually my favorite part of these movies, doesn't seem to bring the same energy or comedy to it. There's, I guess, a twist about his connection to one of the characters, and honestly, it doesn't feel earned. When you think about it, there's a lot going on with this connection, but it just kind of feels thrown in at the last minute. They all of a sudden build up like the whole film was focusing on it, even though it clearly wasn't. And again, that's a big problem with this film, focus. So many of the pirate films have that problem. Even the first one, there's a ton of stuff going on, but you kinda get it. It's these pirates that want to lift this curse, that's it. All the other movies just throw too much at you, and sometimes that can be fun in a film, juggling all these different characters and plot devices and such. But when you're constantly asking yourself what every character's motivation was, and what's the next thing they have to do, or the magic word they have to say, or the secret device they have to find, it feels more like homework than a riveting adventure. Even Javier Bardem, who's usually so good and so entertaining, I'm not sure what he's doing here. I was hoping for something really crazy and over the top, but he's just covered in fake CG and a lot of echo and distortion added to his voice. I'm wondering why they even picked him. Even Davy Jones, for as goofy as he was, had more of a personality than this guy. It just doesn't feel like his identity is fleshed out. If they made him super serious and super still while the CG on him moves around, that could be interesting. Or if they made him super goofy and big-eyed and having fun, that could be kind of interesting too. But instead, I guess it's supposed to be halfway between the two, and it's just kind of a mess. The effects range from really good to really pathetic. Scenes like an island that are supposed to reflect the stars in the sky, or even surprisingly a young Johnny Depp, are done pretty well. But then they do stuff like slow down these zombie sharks so you can really get a good look at how amazing this scene is, and just look at it, you know nothing's there. Why is that impressive? And again, the ghost pirates just look like all the other ghost pirates that have ever been fought in these films. They're just not that threatening anymore. The only scene that really worked, like everything in it clicked perfectly, is when Jack Sparrow and the scientists are about to get executed. The comedy, the action, the stunts, the escape, the lines, it's all super funny, well choreographed, and very impressive. Aside from that, it's just kind of everything you've already seen in the Pirates films, which, don't get me wrong, there's some people that might really enjoy that. When the second Sin City movie came out, I loved it, even though a lot of people said they didn't enjoy it because it just felt like the same thing that was in the last one. Well, I love that world and the characters and the environment so much, I didn't mind something similar. I can see some fans saying the same thing about this. Maybe they do just kind of want that Pirates of the Caribbean experience and these characters to come back and just run around and look goofy and fight ghosts and so forth. If that's what you're looking for, this will definitely give you your fix. But if you're looking for that same feeling of comedy, excitement, fun, and thrills that the first one gave, then you're in for some really bad eggs. Cars 3. Yeah, why not? I mean, okay, I can think of a lot of reasons why not, but here it is, so might as well look it over. As a lot of you know, I didn't really care for the previous Cars movies. In fact, I think Cars 2 is one of the worst films Pixar's ever made. But some people were telling me that Cars 3 was different, it was more adult, it was more grown up, it's the best of the movies. And yeah, out of the movies, I guess that's true, but given the low bar they set, I don't think that's any real big accomplishment. Lightning McQueen is back to racing. Aw, no more spy stuff, what a shame. But he discovers a younger racer named Jackson Storm is breaking his records and eventually even McQueen himself. Getting horribly injured on the racetrack, McQueen decides to leave racing for a while, disappearing into his old town home wondering if he'll ever race again. He decides he does want to race, but he knows that if he's going to, he needs to make some changes. Getting a high-end sponsor behind his back, he gets a new trainer, new location, new equipment, the whole shebang. He starts to become reckless though, being treated like an old-timer, and tries rushing the process. After finding he can't handle a lot of the training equipment, the sponsor suggests maybe he should pull out of the race and they'll still get him some branding. McQueen disagrees though and goes on his own to do his own kind of training, much to the trainer's dismay. She follows him but has trouble keeping up as it's on different types of roads like sand and dirt and so forth. As they hang out more together, he discovers more about her past and her ambitions, and, of course, they find they have a lot in common and they come together for a compromise. So, yeah, let's see, we have a red car who's lost his way, and so he takes some time away training and getting in touch with what really matters, and it sounds a little familiar, huh? Oh, and there's a big race at the end, and there's a twist about not being so selfish? You don't say! Okay, to the film's credit, it really isn't a huge repeat of the first Cars film. I mean, first of all, there is more effort put in. It isn't exactly one of those stories where you know from beginning to end exactly what's gonna happen, but the downside is, it's not really a story where you want to know exactly what's gonna happen either. There's a lot of sitting around and talking, surprisingly enough. Don't get me wrong, when a lot of Pixar films do that, it's usually done very well and is very encouraged. But it's still Cars 3. It's Owen Wilson going wow every other second. No, seriously, somebody do a wow count on this movie. I think it broke a record even for Owen Wilson. There's not a ton of creativity or excitement or even that many laughs. It's just sort of them talking about what really matters and talking about different training techniques, what works, what doesn't. Honestly, looking it over, it seems more like the virtual reality stuff was doing better. That's how the other guy got in the lead, and how many times you gonna race on the beach or in the forest or anything like that? Doesn't it make sense to master the racetrack? It's like an opera singer learning how to do rap. Okay, it's good to broaden your horizons, but I just don't see that much crossover. The only time where I saw a legit amount of creativity is when he was doing some dirt racing. The designs of a lot of these cars, especially this school bus, were really creative and fun to look at. But aside from that, the story and characters aren't really riveting enough for adults, and it's not really goofy or fun enough for kids. Now again, that's not to say it's awful, and this is coming from a guy who really hated the first two car films. You can tell the filmmakers really cared about what they were saying and writing and animating and the performances, but it's just stuff we've seen in other sports movies. Nothing new is really added. The fact that their cars is still distracting, it really doesn't add anything to the world. I still don't fully understand how this world works. The ending climax, while character-driven, still doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Ooh, you want to let someone else race? Great. Why don't you do that with someone else's money who's paying millions of dollars to brand you? This just seems like a douchey move, and the explanation they have for how they got away with it still seems dumb. So, was I pulling my hair out at it? No. Did I hear a ton of bad jokes? A couple, but not that many. Is it as annoying and or bland as the previous Cars films? Not by a long shot. But I still can't say I was that entertained. I guess if you like the car movies and you kinda want a more adult take on it, this does okay. If you have a soft spot for some of these sports and training cliches, you'll get through it alright. But I don't know how many kids would be that excited for this story, and I don't know how many adults would be that excited for this story. I guess out of the Cars movies, this one is the best, but given its background, it's not much of a race to win. It's the real Avengers 2. I mean Captain America Civil War. Yeah, the real Avengers 2. Don't get me wrong, I like Avengers 2 fine, but this was the movie that really felt like it was pushing Marvel films to the next level. And it's literally just missing two Avengers, and it adds so many other characters that, just screw it, this is the real Avengers 2. Out of all the Marvel movies so far, I have to admit, this might be my favorite one. Marvel films, when they started out, were known for doing things very different, but after a while, they were starting to get kind of a repetition. People could recognize when they were building up another Marvel film, or when there was a joke that didn't need to have a joke. There was a little bit of a formula. But every once in a while, one comes along to push the envelope just a little bit more, and this one definitely does that. Captain America has a lot on his plate. Not only has he lost the love of his life to old age, man, that's gotta be a surreal thing to go through, but he's also trying to protect Bucky, the Winter Soldier, because he doesn't think he's really bad, he was just brainwashed, constantly deal with the government trying to tell him and his team what he can't and can't do, and even start butting heads with Tony Stark, who feels a great deal of guilt for the people that might have been killed in their battles. When more explosions and assassinations keep popping up around them though, a choice is made to finally stop the Avengers, but half of them don't want to, particularly Captain America. Mostly because the other half see Bucky as dangerous and should be turned in. So it's a battle of heroes and ideologies as the team is split and they constantly go against each other trying to get Bucky. As well as figure out who the real mastermind behind all of this is. Oh, and did I also mention Black Panther? Oh, and Spider-Man? Oh, and the death of Tony's mother? Oh, and like a billion other things going on in this movie that are so massive that the villain is actually just kind of a wormy guy, not even a big-time Marvel villain. In any other movie, this would be way too much, and I would be so pissed off that the Marvel villain is another letdown. But what makes this film so good is every character's motivation is completely understood. It's perfectly explained, it's perfectly talked about. When an action sequence starts, you don't say to yourself, why are we having this action sequence? You know exactly why. Every time there's a twist or a turn, it doesn't feel like it's just the movie trying to trick you, it feels like it's something else to motivate the characters more. Yes, there's a bad guy technically setting this up, but he's almost sidelined at the end. The real focus is these different heroes and their different ideologies, and you understand them both, relate with them both, and feel conflicted. You still love both of these sides. It's not like in Avengers 2 where you just say, what the hell is Tony Stark doing? He's being a jackass, or actually a lot of the other Iron Man movies, the more I think about it. You legitimately get where he's coming from. You get where all sides are coming from, because all the characters are perfectly established, charming, likable, distinct, and interesting. While there is a lot of talking and running around, there's also some incredible action sequences. The one at the airport, unbelievable. It was kind of like watching the climax in the first Avengers. It's one of those fights you never think you're gonna see on the big screen, at least not from Marvel comic books. You remember how big and epic they were when you were reading them, with also the funny one-liners and the distinct characters and the great action sequences, and here it is! On the big screen, these fights are so amazing! I'm always shocked after all these years how they can not only make these action sequences so creative and so good, but how the CG most of the time can look really good, and even when it doesn't, it's still so imaginative. These moves are so clever and fast, and what makes us on board with them is the fact that the characters are so clever and fast. If we just did this action sequence and none of them ever talked, it would fail. It would go on too long, it'd be boring. But because we do love these characters and we love the way they interact off each other, and it's interesting to see them fight one another, it's one of the great Marvel moments. In my opinion, it's one of the best Marvel movies, if not the best. I may still need a little time to look over all the Marvel movies and see where they're all going and what they do with them, but in terms of a Marvel movie that was deep, complex, action-packed, had great characters, had great laughs, kept me interested all the way through, and I couldn't wait to see what happened next, this is the movie that has everything. It's adult, it's childish, there's a lot of sitting around talking, there's a lot of running around fighting. It's funny, it's serious, it's uplifting, it's sad. It just has everything I would want from a really great comic book movie. So grab a shield or swing on in, because both sides are ready to give you one hell of a time. So I thought I knew all the really big Disney Channel movies like High School Musical, Xenon, and so forth. But after I did the Disneycember focusing on the Disney Channel movies, everyone seemed to say I miss Lemonade Mouth. How could you not talk about Lemonade Mouth? Everybody knows Lemonade Mouth, and yeah, I never even heard of it. But sure enough, I got a copy, took a look, and what the hell did I just watch? The setup for this movie you can so easily see on a chart in some executive's office. What if The Breakfast Club had a rock band? That's pretty much it. A bunch of anti-authoritative teens who are really good deep down in their hearts, but are always fighting against the evil bad principal who just doesn't get the joke. No, really, they say that a lot in this. Lemonade Mouth is a movement. Yeah, this is less of a movement and more of that Saved by the Bell episode where they go into the history of their band. Yeah, remember that was an episode with all the stereotypical band cliches? It's pretty much what this is. A group of absolutely beautiful kids all get in trouble for various reasons. Thus, they're all sent to detention on the same day, and wouldn't you know it, they all happen to have incredible musical abilities. The music teacher really wants to utilize their talents and put them in a band so that she can really stick it to the big bad principal who just cares about getting sponsorships for his sports teams. But dude, that's not what they really want to do. They were just horsing around. Or do they? Over time, they think about it and decide they do want to put a band together. But there's a big, bad, evil band who's even more popular and constantly tries to sabotage them. And wouldn't you know it, they're in cahoots with the principal. Well, wait, I thought he was cutting funding to the music program because it didn't get enough people looking at it, but everyone seems to know this group. When it's discovered the good guys band is gonna play alongside them, shortening their run, the whole entire school is pissed off at them. Well, wait a minute, if the whole entire school knows who they are and they get angry at this, clearly there would be money behind it. Hell, looks like more people are into this band than they are basketball or football. However, when the big bad band is making fun of them, one of them takes a big gulp of lemonade and spits it at him, resulting in their band name Lemonade Mouth. Of course? They They of course turn out to be a big hit, but they don't want to do this for the music, they want to do it because they have something important to say. Like how they're actually gonna take away the lemonade vending machine. What? First of all, when have you ever seen a sign on a vending machine that says it's gonna be moved? Who does that? Second, who gives a shit? You see her talk in front of the whole audience saying like, yeah, they're gonna get rid of the lemonade vending machine and bring in this other one that's like a corporate sponsor, and everyone's like, boo! What? She tries to turn into this big movement that the school is too controlled by the sponsorship, but the big bad principal shuts it down. They're too dangerous. The school is just so excited about their movement that they keep putting signs everywhere. Even this giant banner that this guy for the life of him can't get down. Look at this. Is he even trying? Oh, I tried lightly tugging on it. Let me try lightly tugging on it some more. Oh, maybe if I kind of push it. Oh, that didn't work. Maybe if I push it. Oh, that didn't work. Maybe if I push it. What is this movie? And then everything, and I do mean quite literally everything, simultaneously goes wrong. One of them loses their voice, the other gets allergies, the other has family problems, the other like smashes his fingers. Like, what are the chances? But it's okay. When they get to the big climax at the end where they're supposed to play, they all choke. That's right, none of them can do it. Some of them get the nerves or they're just thrown off or whatever, but the audience sings the song for them. And next thing you know, they're at Madison Square Gardens. How the hell did that happen? You're literally so bad the crowd has to sing the song for you and suddenly you're landing this gig? I mean, I'm sure time is supposed to have passed and everything, but come on, that's kind of a big edit. I think a few other things would happen in between. So yeah, as you'd imagine, this movie's pretty stupid. I can't say it's quite Camp Rock 2 bad or Cheetah Girls bad. I mean, it is really dumb, but it is kind of enjoyable how dumb it is. I'll also give it credit that it is trying to tackle something of substance. I mean, the kids do have some real problems. They talk about them, they try to figure them out. I like the idea of questioning school authority. I mean, when you think about it, you actually don't see that too much in Disney Channel films. But all of it just feels so phony and manipulative. None of it feels real. You just feel like they're trying to tell a G-rated version of Behind the Music. Sometimes it results in some real good laughs though. Christopher McDonald, for example, has made a whole career out of being the bully. He just has the look, he has the mannerisms, he has the acting for it, he always plays this part. But he's done it so much, he's kind of turned into Nelson from The Simpsons. He's just this archetype, but really has fun with it, and he is hilarious in this. He knows exactly what he's supposed to be, and he goes beautifully over the top with it. Look at him on this Segway. How many hours must he have spent on this thing to get these movements down? It's just hilarious. It's rough. On the one hand, I really want to support something that says stand up to authority and be aware of manipulation, but this is coming from an authoritative company that is manipulating you, and it's doing a really bad job hiding it. And it's corny, and it's silly, and it's forceful, and none of it makes sense at all. I guess I would probably put this in the Camp Rock group where it's just so ridiculous and dumb that it's kind of funny. I can't think of any particular bad messages being said, at least if I don't think too hard about them. I get the feeling the actors are trying to get across something genuine, but it just never feels that way. You're always aware of the Disney stamp, you're always aware that it's a Disney Channel movie, and you're always aware it's trying to sell you this group, not start a movement. It's pretty lame, but I had a few chuckles at how lame it was. If this is something that really inspired you and helped you start a movement, good for you, go fight the man. But if you're a kid searching for artistic integrity, you're probably gonna get more laughs than provoking thoughts. I don't think I've seen a movie like Coco where people were so ready to declare it a Disney classic the second it came out since probably Frozen. Critics loved it, people loved it, adults loved it, kids loved it, and yeah, I have to agree, I'm on the same boat. Coco is not only visually amazing, but it's great with its characters, it's phenomenal with its music, its colors are unbelievable, the imagination is fantastic, it's funny, it's heartfelt, you'll laugh, you'll cry, it's kind of everything you want out of a movie. Which is funny because the setup for this film I usually hate. Miguel, a young boy in Mexico, loves playing the guitar and absolutely adores music, but his family, tell me if you've heard this one before, doesn't like music because something happened in the past that makes them suddenly hate all music, so it's forbidden, but that can't stop Miguel from wanting to pursue it. Christ, I hate these kind of stories. I hate them to my core. I hate them because you know music isn't bad. You know the people that forbid it are gonna come around, and that's most of the focus. Just someone trying to live their art and somebody else being a jerk until the very end. Thank heavenly God, though, that's not what this movie is focused on. It's actually more of a side thing. You see, Miguel has this fascination with his great-great-grandfather, who abandoned his great-great-grandmother, even leaving behind a 3-year-old daughter, Coco. Coco doesn't remember much and doesn't even process much. She doesn't even always know who Miguel is. But nevertheless, they get along very well, and Miguel always tries to figure out more about his great-great-grandfather, who was a famous musician. When the Day of the Dead comes, however, he steals his great-great-grandfather's guitar, and that sends him all the way into the land of the dead. This world is amazing. It looks so grand, so gigantic, so colorful, you practically want to live there. Or die there, you know what I mean. He comes across a bumbling skeleton named Hector, and the two of them have to juggle, well, surprisingly a lot in this story, as they have to get the family's respect, they have to get back to the land of the living while getting Hector to the land of the dead, try to find Hector's great-great-grandfather while also unraveling this mystery, while also trying to stop people from forgetting who they are, because once somebody forgets who they are, then they disappear altogether. It's surprisingly kind of complicated, which makes it all the more interesting that I actually followed all of it, and apparently a lot of kids seem to follow it too. The film is very good at holding your hand when it needs to hold your hand and letting it go when it needs to let it go. This plot could have so easily been too complicated, but I was amazed at how well I could follow along. This is also one of the few recent Disney stories that has a surprise villain, but it works. The setup isn't just to go gotcha, it's to actually set up a connection between some of the other characters, and it works into what they were setting up before, and it furthers what's coming up next. A surprise villain can be fine, but it has to work into the story, and that's exactly what this one does. The characters are all so likable. Even the ones that forbid music are still very likable. They're so energetic, yet they all move differently, and the different facial expressions and the different energies that they all have is just so great to watch. In most Disney movies, I can think of a comic relief that I don't like or a side character that gets too much attention, but here, everyone feels like they get just the right amount of screen time to be really enjoyable. It's funny because everyone says they get teary-eyed at the end of this movie, and I get teary-eyed too, but not at the scene you're thinking. For me, it's early on when Miguel just likes hanging with Coco, and Coco half the time doesn't even know who he is, but she just looks so happy and content and comfortable being around him. And he knows she doesn't know who he is, but he still wants to entertain her nonetheless because he's just such a likable character, and oh my god, this gets me every time. It's just so sweet and it melts my heart. I guess if I really had to nitpick, the only scene I thought was a little pointless is where Miguel is performing in front of all these other dead people. It's not a bad scene, I just didn't entirely see the point of it. It didn't seem to connect to the rest of the story, where everything else really connects to the story. Maybe it was just an excuse to have another song, which in a movie like this, I can kinda see why. The music is a big part of it. The song that eventually won an Oscar, Remember Me, is so good because they play it in so many different ways. Early on, it's played as this big show number, this big gigantic thing where there's like dancing women and fancy costumes and loud instruments, but then it can also be played as such a slow, soft, thoughtful song. And that's really where it shines, and that's what it was meant to be. It's so clever how this movie shows the different ways you can look at music, like the different ways you can look at people, or life, or death. It's just, damn it, it's so good! Now, I feel like I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't bring up a film that was rather similar called Book of Life. This came out before Coco, and it also has to deal a lot with music and Day of the Dead and this bright, colorful world. Honestly, when I saw Coco, the first thing that popped in my head is that this was gonna be a ripoff. But at the same time, I had to remind myself it's kinda like seeing Santa Claus in a different Christmas movie. This is just kind of the day. Day of the Dead does have a very distinct look, and both these movies do pick up on it. And in comparing the two, Coco is by far the better movie, but I don't know, is there a lot taken from this? Were they kind of looking at each other the same way Ants and Bugs Life was kind of keeping tabs on one another? I feel like for all the originality that's in this movie, I have to bring up a film that does have a similar visual style and ideas. Nevertheless, Coco still feels like its own thing. Visually it's amazing, musically it's amazing, the characters are amazing, the animation, the colors, it's all amazing. Based on its description from the plot and forbidding music and the surprise villain, I would think I would hate this film. But, much like the movie teaches, it's all about a different point of view. And the point of view this movie has, I know I'm going to be watching a whole lot more in the future. Sorry, Doom fans, this is not the BFG you're thinking of. This is instead Steven Spielberg and Disney joining forces to bring the classic Roald Dahl book to life. It didn't do very well at the box office, and honestly, I'd be lying if I said I didn't see why. BFG is not a bad movie. There aren't any moments that were cringeworthy or I was going nuts watching it, but at the same time, it does exactly what you expect it to do with no surprises. Sophie is a girl in an orphanage who one night wakes up and swears she heard something. Sure enough, she sees it too. A giant, played by Mark Rylance, well, motion capture, but we'll get to that in a bit, sees that she sees him and decides to kidnap her. Afraid she'll tell people of his existence. He takes her to the land of giants, not exactly knowing what to do with her, but over time, as you'd imagine, they spawn a little bit of a friendship. She goes with him to mystical places and even helps him capture dreams. But it turns out he's actually a very tiny giant, and the other bigger giants pick on him all the time. One day, when he finally fights back, they discover that he's keeping Sophie and demand to see her. When he refuses to hand her over, they decide to go on a kidnapping spree, taking a bunch of children from their homes to the land of the giants. So it's up to Sophie and the big friendly giant to not only stop them, but also alert the queen and her army to do something about it. Growing up, I really loved the original book. It was slow moving, but you really kind of felt this connection. It somehow felt mature, even though it was still written for kids. The movie very much tries to capture that as well as the whimsical side to it, but I feel like Spielberg has been putting too much emphasis on the whimsical side and not the realistic side. And I know, it's giants, it's catching dreams, it's fantasy, it's not realistic at all. But part of what made the book so special is that it felt real. There were a lot of times where they just stood around and talked or saw how he put things together and the different foods and elements that were all around this world. And again, to Spielberg's credit, he does show all that. But the problem is, unlike something like E.T. where the camera can stay still and you can really feel like you're in this home with an alien in it, here the camera is always flying, always whizzing, music is always going doo-doo-doo, doo-doo-doo, it never takes a break. Because it's always trying to look so flashy and impress you, you never really feel like the girl and the giant are in the same scene. Even though both the leads are incredibly good actors, it always looks like the girl is talking to nobody and a motion capture person is put in later. While the CGI on him is not bad, it's not really convincing either. I always think of Game of Thrones and how they did the giant in that show. That was just a guy in makeup, and they just used computers to put him in the same scene. They didn't have to CG everything around him. They didn't have to give him this CG skin. They didn't have to make him look so flat and shiny. Doing that creates another wall of effects we have to look past. It's already one illusion. It's making a normal-sized person look big. But now it's trying to convince you that the CG skin is really there, when clearly it's not. Half the time when he's holding her, the effects don't look that great either. She never quite looks right. She looks like this awkward CG puppet, like something out of Polar Express that's not rendered. Speaking of which, with so much CG in this movie, you gotta wonder, why the hell wasn't it just animated? I mean, these giants never move like they're really there. They either move too fast or like there's no weight to their actions. When you watch something like Godzilla, King Kong, or the Lord of the Rings movies, there's this kind of movement that feels like they're really large. They slow it down and it gives the creatures such an immense size to them. Here they just kind of move like people, maybe a hint slower. I know that may seem like nitpicking, but it feels like what Spielberg is trying to do is make the moment of this little girl and this giant talking to each other feel really special, but when you don't feel like they're really there in the same scene, it doesn't work. And it doesn't help that the cinematography and the effects are constantly trying to show off. You can have a lot of fancy movement, you can have a lot of fancy music, but when all of them are like that and you don't pace it out, it gets tiring. It's like every scene is trying to be the glowing fingers scene from E.T. Separately, these scenes are fine, but when you put them all together, it just kind of becomes bland and generic. The only scene that actually kind of intrigued me comes from this one actress. She plays the Queen, and you might recognize her from Downton Abbey. She has to say the most ridiculous dialogue. She has to say that she had a dream that kids were being kidnapped by giants and she believes it's real, and if you look out the window, you'll see a girl and a giant. That's ridiculous, but by God, she sells it. And you want to know why? Because it's not a fancy scene. It's just a person acting and doing a really great job. No special effects, no zooming around, no loud music, just a really good actress acting. Had this movie focused more on that, it could have been something really great like the book. As is, it's just kind of standard. I feel like Spielberg is kind of behind on what makes special family films magical. Pixar films have a lot of movement too, but it also takes a lot of chances. They know how to space it out. On top of that, they have a really good sense of humor that connects with both children and adults. Here we have violent green farting. Yep, there's a whole scene in the royal dining room of people rocket farting into the air. And there's no punchline, no character-driven joke, just farting. It's so pedestrian I can't even get insulted by it. It's just dumb. Overall though, like I said, the movie really isn't that bad, just nothing really stands out about it that we haven't seen in a million other films. It's tired, it's boring, it could be magical, but it's trying to be too showy and inspiring. If you saw the trailer and think you might like it, you'll get exactly what it promised. But if you're looking for something deeper, rocket fart away far, far from this. So it's gonna sound weird, but I have a slightly complicated relationship with Zootopia. When the film first came out, I thought it was okay and had some criticism that I thought it was a little too obvious. It was clear what it was trying to say, the way it was trying to say it, and at the time, I didn't think it needed to be made so clear. I can't account for when this video is being watched, but I can say at the current moment I'm recording this, being clear about this subject, especially to a younger generation, is probably more important now than it has been in a while. The story focuses around Judy Hopps, the first bunny to officially be a police officer. As such though, a lot of the other bigger animals don't really give her much attention and kinda just push her aside. When she stumbles across a case though of some kind of device that's turning animals savage, that is, turning predators into literal blood-hungry animals, she's put on the case along with a con artist named Nick, who seems to have a lot of information and understanding about it. As typical buddy cop movies go though, they don't always get along, see their differences can be really big differences, but see their similarities can also be very big similarities. They get in fights, blow up, have misunderstandings, but in the end comprehend what's most important. As well as, of course, uncovering the evil scheme and putting the evil villain away. So like I said, this sounds like a very standard buddy cop movie just done with animals. But it turns out this is more like In the Heat of the Night than it is Lethal Weapon. The idea is somebody is trying to turn all the animals against each other, particularly against the predators. The predators, despite being as civilized as anyone else, are being made to look like dumb, evil, blood-hungry monsters. In an especially important scene, Judy, who's very likable, brings up that she actually has a little bit of a prejudice against predators that she never even considered. It's a prejudice she was unaware of and doesn't want to believe she ever had. Alright, so it's already kind of a risky move for a Disney animated movie to talk about race and race wars and so forth, but to have the incredibly likable main character have a little bit of a prejudice herself is a ballsy move. The idea of the film is not to say one side is to blame, it's quite the opposite. Everybody has the capacity to be something they shouldn't want to be. Hell, most don't want to be, yet in some way or another, still sneaks its way through. Using the metaphor with animals, while obvious, is still pretty clever. We see them grow up with the image that's projected onto them, and we understand it because we project images onto animals. Bunnies are cute, foxes are sneaky, wolves are dangerous. But the more the movie invites us into these different environments and these different people and these different cultures, the more we understand their world. But still from a child's point of view. You can see Officer Hopps running through this tiny little neighborhood that's really creative and really funny, but you can also see why that neighborhood exists, what kind of characters hang out there, and why they hang out there. It's something that can very easily be connected to reality. Because of this, the film doesn't come across quite as preachy as you would think. It isn't as simple as racism and prejudice is just bad. It does analyze why it exists, where it can be found, and how so many can exploit it to their own gain. Like I said, when I first saw it, I enjoyed it. I just thought it was hammering the nail on the head a little too hard. But with the amount of current crimes that seem to not understand the message of this film, it makes me realize now it needs to hit it on the head. And it needs to do so in a way that both kids and adults can get. I've known people from every political background who enjoy this film. Democrat, Republican, conservative, liberal, it doesn't matter. It still connects as a smart, funny family picture. And it seems like the majority of people that see it get the idea and agree with it. On top of that though, it is a really creative movie. I mean, just the layout of the city and the different parts and how they're all designed to somehow welcome every type of animal. It leads to some funny jokes, but also some clever analogies. I also like the designs of these animals too, like this Nick character. Even if you never told me who voiced him, I would say that's Jason Bateman. I don't know how they do it, but just look at him. You can tell that's Jason Bateman voicing that character, even if he never talks. The expressions, the movements, the colors, it all works. So like they say, timing is everything. I never disliked this film, but I never realized the actual importance of it. Like a lot of great stories, it can speak to children on one level and then speak to adults in a different level. But not just through kids' jokes and adult jokes. It does so through dramatic kids' themes and dramatic adult themes, making this movie about animals surprisingly very human. So yeah, when I first saw it, I thought it could have been even funnier or play around with convention a little bit more, but strangely enough, you have to see something very familiar in order to invoke change. And there's nothing more familiar than a mirror. And this movie did a good job mirroring the comedy we want to see, the characters we want to see, and the changes we want to see. Here's hoping even obvious can be obvious enough. I already reviewed The Force Awakens as a sibling rivalry for Disneycember, but a few years have gone by and even more Star Wars movies have come out, so I think it makes sense to look back and see if it still holds up. Force Awakens is the first Star Wars movie that pretty much had no input from George Lucas after he sold Star Wars to Disney. The funny thing about it is it's probably the Star Wars movie that plays it the most safe, yet somehow also still takes a few risks. The story is years later, the Empire are gone, but the First Order is now in charge. Let's just say it, another Empire. They didn't even change the Stormtrooper clothes. You'll find there's a lot of repeating in this though, as a droid has some information about the First Order that could be incredibly helpful. An escaped pilot named Poe and an ex-Stormtrooper named Finn escape the First Order and get to, what a shock, a desert planet. They come across a poor young person who doesn't know her family and coincidentally happens to be really strong with the Force, and she's being hunted by a dark masked entity. The race is on to get the droid to the rebellion while also getting help from Han Solo and Chewie. Wow, didn't even need to change the names on that one. So yeah, as everyone has said before, this is pretty much a retread of New Hope, and I'd be lying if I said I wasn't exactly a big fan of that. While what actually happens in the movie is a little too familiar, the setup is actually kinda different. Details that some fans might find upsetting, other fans find actually kind of intriguing and good at continuing the story. For example, Han Solo and Princess Leia are no longer together. And I'll keep this spoiler free, but if you know how A New Hope goes, you know there's a death in it. And while it's not exactly a shocker, it is still kind of a risky move. The original Star Wars trilogy combined a lot of different elements of myth and fairy tales and folklore and philosophy and religion, all these different things. The ending, though, is mostly fairy tale. It's a happy ending. The people who should be together are together, the people who should be dead are dead, the people who should be alive are alive, and they're all happy. This definitely throws a wrench in that fairy tale, and people are either gonna love that or hate it. For me, I like the idea that I can just accept the original 3 movies as they are and then see this as kind of another continuation that I don't have to accept. If I want, I can just say it ended at Return of the Jedi. But if other movies are gonna continue, this is not a bad way to continue them. I'd be lying if I said I didn't really want the book versions to make it to the big screen, but for something entirely original, which I can see why they want to do that too, I guess this makes sense. It's kind of like comparing the Doom books. The first one's about the coming of the Messiah, and he comes and brings balance. In the second one, reality sets in, and you find out it's not all that simple. While I see the charm and even sometimes the importance of the fairy tale ending, at the same time, I do like questioning happily ever after. I do like saying what happens when real life gets in the way. How do you confront it? How do you win it? Can you win it? What happens when you fail? These are more interesting questions that I feel can help people along with life. But it also still keeps that mythos fantasy angle, and yeah, I have to be honest, it's the first Star Wars movie since probably Return of the Jedi that really felt like Star Wars. Revenge of the Sith came close, but it was still a little too modern Lucas-y. This had a lot of practical effects, this had a lot of dirt on everything, this had stuff that was really there, and aliens with interesting identities, and people with interesting identities, and they were charming and they were funny. They had mystery set up, they had villains that were complex. I wanted to see where everything was going with these characters. And as I said in my Nostalgia Critic review, I think that's why there was so much repeating, to show that they can do a Star Wars movie. This is Disney now, Lucas is gone, they want to show that they can do this right. But again, there are still just enough risks taken that it did keep my interest, and I did want to know where the movies were going. If I saw any of the prequels on their own, I wouldn't care what was in the next film. But if I saw this on its own, I would have to know what happens next. One of the things that surprised me the most about this movie was Harrison Ford as Han Solo. I don't know how to put this nicely, but the past few years, Harrison Ford hasn't exactly been that amazing an actor. It always feels like he's trying to overcompensate. He's trying to act super tough to show that he hasn't been away for too long, he's not too old, and so you just kind of see the bottom of his teeth jutting out and him acting really mad, and it always felt kind of phony. But here, he's Han Solo, and he's older, and he's great, and he's hilarious, and he's smart, and he's a really great character in this. The rest of the acting is really good too. Kylo Ren, if you were to describe this villain to me, I would think would not be a particularly strong character, but the way he's played and written, he is so complex, he is so interesting, he is so torn. You want to help this guy out, you want him to be accepted, but at the same time he's done so many terrible things and will continue to do terrible things, and you just go back and forth with him, which is what I feel you should do with a villain like this. I'll admit it is a little weird watching it now, knowing the direction a lot of these films go. I do remember kind of this excitement when the film started and we were back in Star Wars, but now that we're getting one, sometimes even two a year, I'd be lying if I said the size and magnitude of this movie hasn't gone down a little bit. But watching it years later, it still has a lot of atmosphere, a lot of great effects, a lot of charm, a lot of jokes, a lot of great characters. It's still not only a decent Star Wars movie, but just a good movie overall. It's entertaining, it's action-packed, it's got some great effects, it's got a lot of imagination. Now the more we do get is kind of a different story, and we'll get to that soon, but for this film, watching it years later, it's kind of like meeting up with an old friend again. An imperfect friend, but still a friend nonetheless. This is definitely not the kind of TV movie I expected from the same people that did High School Musical and Xenon. Color of Friendship is probably the most mature any of the Disney Channel movies have ever been. Hell, it might be the most mature Disney's ever been considering the subject matter. I mean, before this, the crowning achievement of racial relations was Pocahontas and Song of the South. Think about that! The story centers around a girl named Piper. She's living a happy life in the 1970s while her congressman dad is trying to fight for equal rights in South Africa. Not surprisingly, Piper hears a lot about South Africa and would love to have somebody come and visit. And it just so happens there's a foreign student program at school, so they sign up to take somebody from South Africa in. The only downside is they don't get a black kid, they get a white kid named Marie. In a perfect world, this wouldn't mean shit, but coming from South Africa where there's a huge divide and inequality, let's just say Marie is shocked that the black people she's staying with aren't her servants. It takes a while for both of them to get over the culture shock, but eventually Marie decides she doesn't want to go back home and she wants to stay. Obviously, over time, she starts to see this family beyond the color of their skin, and she even sees the differences between the two worlds, not just how bad things are in South Africa, but how not always great things are in America too. Based loosely on a short story written by the real Piper Dellums, I have to admit I cringe at the idea of imagining Disney tackling something like this. It's kind of like when Captain Planet tried to talk about AIDS. You just don't think they're up to it. And don't get me wrong, there are some moments that don't work in it. First of all, I constantly have to be reminded it's the 70s. Something about it just looks so modern and current. I have to keep reminding myself, oh yeah, it's 1977. Once in a while they'll try on clothes and look at records, but I don't know, does it really look like we've traveled back in time here? It just kind of looks like we're watching a modern Disney Channel movie. The other problem I have is that the friendship between the two girls seems to kind of go back and forth a little too quickly. There's one point where Marie is taken away and Piper's like, no, we gotta get her back, but then maybe within the span of a day she suddenly decides that she's too prejudiced and that they can never belong together, and it just kind of comes out of nowhere. Even when they're getting along, I don't know, they just kind of do the traditional thing of trying on clothes, giggling, and then talking about their different cultures. I don't really know too much else about what they connect on. But with those two problems out of the way, I have to admit this is actually a very adult kids film. Whenever they do sit down and talk about race and the different cultures and what's right and what's not, it kind of has me tugging at my shirt collar a little bit like, man, can Disney do this? Are they able to talk about this in a mature way? But at the same time, I do listen to them and I believe what they're saying, and it's kind of one of those uncomfortable situations where it's good to be uncomfortable. But even then, they still address there's a lot of problems in America too, and we're trying to get that figured out, and is there an easy solution? Is there a complicated solution? It's tough for an adult to hear, but important for a kid to hear. Honestly, to a point where I'm kind of wondering how many kids paid attention. I mean, it's so strange because I always say kids films need to be more adult and they need to be more mature, but for a Disney Channel movie, not much really happens in terms of action or comedy or slapstick or usual stuff you see in these kind of films. There's no big chase or evil villain or pies in the face or anything like that. It's just a lot of people sitting around talking. Oh, not that I want a goddamn big chase or pie in the face or anything like that, but that's what a lot of kids familiarize Disney Channel films with. But that stuff obviously wouldn't fit here, shouldn't be here, and at the same time I've heard a lot of people did grow up with this movie and they did really like it. I suppose it's hard to say whether or not I agree 100% on the portrayal because, well, I didn't grow up in South Africa. I've never been there. I didn't know how things were done or how they're done now, and I know chunks of its history, so it sounds right, but again, I don't know how race relations were in South America at the time, so I don't know if this is brilliantly simplified or insultingly simplified. To me, it sounds like they don't shy away from the tough stuff. They talk about when people are beaten to death. They talk about some people being seen as terrorists and some people not being seen as terrorists. They talk about white babies dying compared to black babies dying. Holy shit, this is a Disney Channel movie! I expected to flinch a lot more in this film, but surprisingly, I listened. And I listened with intrigue. Like I said, I don't know how authentically simplified it is, but what it has to say still sounds just meaningful and important. And for Disney to come across that way in a film about race relations, let alone a Disney Channel film? That's really damn impressive. I guess we can say Zootopia wasn't the first Disney film to tackle this subject matter well, because if you look hard enough, you just might find this hidden gem. Spider-Man fans are interesting. And I mean that in the literal sense. It's not code for bitter, crazy, or obsessive. I mean, actually interesting. When the first Spider-Man movie came out, people went crazy. This is it. This is Spider-Man on the big screen. They totally got it right. And then, when the second reboot came out, everyone said, oh yeah, that old Spider-Man crap, that's history. This is the one that gets it right. This is the one that finally nailed it. And now we're on the third reboot, SpiderMan Homecoming. And, yep, this is the one that gets it right. The others were crap. This is the one that totally nails it. Awesome, so we finally get Spider-Man as an actual man? Oh, no, he's still a boy again. Okay, the others did that. I guess it'll be nice to see him hook up with Mary Jane again. Oh, she's not even revealed as Mary Jane until the end. But at least she's that confident Spitfire or really cynical hates everything girl now. Well, his relationship with aging Aunt May must... Whoa, that's different. Well, it'll be fun seeing him work as a photographer for the Daily Bugle. That's not in this either. Well, at least he still has issues battling bullies who are kind of bigger geeks than him. Well, you know what? As long as they get the core, the whole reason for him being Spider-Man, the death of his Uncle Ben, not even mentioned. I'm not even sure if Uncle Ben exists in this universe. Wow, that's kind of like taking away Batman's parents. It's honestly the reason he is who he is. But this is the Spider-Man we've all been waiting for? I mean, just look at that poster. Isn't that exactly how we want to see the best version of Spider-Man? Okay, before you bring down that anvil of hate on me, keep in mind, I think this is a good movie. I think you could argue one of the more entertaining, if not the most entertaining of the Spider-Man films. Tom Holland plays Peter Parker this time, and the whole movie is based around him trying to be the amazing Spider-Man, while also trying to have a normal social life and live up to his hero, Iron Man, played again by Robert Downey Jr. But of course there's trouble on the horizon as an evil villain called the Vulture, played by another Birdman, Michael Keaton, is trying to get revenge for his job and life being ruined. Add a lot of comedy, twists and turns, and some really fun performances, and you get a very funny, very enjoyable Marvel movie. Yeah, that's kind of the big difference between this Spider-Man movie and the others. The others were Spider-Man films that just happened to be Marvel. This is a Marvel film that just happens to be Spider-Man. Spider-Man, don't get me wrong, is supposed to be funny and at times lighthearted, but it's also supposed to be big. There's a reason he's one of the most famous superheroes there is. It isn't just the powers, it's the story, it's the character, it's the conflict. And that's dabbled with here, but there's nothing really that grand or epic about it. The other Spider-Mans, for all their problems, were big movies. This, I think, is kind of on the level of Ant-Man. I love Ant-Man. But Ant-Man isn't Spider-Man. Spider-Man is Spider-Man. And when I think Spider-Man, I think of him walking home after letting his uncle down, his head hanging low, thinking about with great power comes great responsibility. What I got out of this was, I really want to make Tony Stark happy. Nailed it? Now, with all that said, I know exactly why they made these choices, and honestly, they are the perfect choices to make. This is the third Spider-Man reboot in a very short amount of time. People are sick of seeing him get bitten by the spider. People are sick of seeing Uncle Ben get shot. They're sick of all these repeated story elements that we've seen a million times. Marvel very wisely takes a completely different angle. It does make it more light. It does make it more fun. It does make it more goofy. You know, not Sam Raimi goofy, but Marvel goofy, the goofy that we all have grown to love. From a business standpoint and an entertainment standpoint, this makes total sense to do. You can't do another big Spider-Man, not right now anyway. You need something smaller, you need something cuter, you need something lighter. They had to deal with the limitations of the audience's knowledge, which is they've already seen 2 Spider-Man series, and more are apparently on the way. So yeah, the changes to this movie are actually very clever. I'll even go as far to say needed to be done. I like that they focus a lot on the high schoolers and the New Yorkers and their overall goofy attitude. Keaton is hands down my favorite Spider-Man villain, both being kind of funny but legitimately creepy at the same time. And the action, while not as epic as the other films, is still a lot of fun and very smart. I just don't get why everyone says this is their big epic Spider-Man movie. Be really honest, if you knew nothing about Spider-Man and you just went into this film completely blind, would you say this is one of the great superhero movies? Would you say that was huge, epic, I can see this lasting for years and years? I honestly can't. But at the same time, compared to the other Spider-Man movies, there's kind of fewer flaws. The Sam Raimi films, you can make fun of how goofy and over the top and awkward they are. The Webb films, you can argue how overly complicated they are. Comparatively, this has the least problems, and I think that's why so many people do see it as the best Spider-Man film. But because I do see Spider-Man as a very big and even very important character, I really feel that size and importance isn't represented here. My hope honestly is with future movies they kinda work backwards. Maybe they can show in flashbacks Uncle Ben and something that happened to him, or maybe go more into why Spider-Man does what he does and him growing up and becoming an actual man. Because here, even though I love seeing him interact with Tony Stark, that's not what should make him want to be Spider-Man. It's funny because there's a scene where Tony Stark comes in and takes the suit away and says you have to figure out why you're doing what you're doing. And yeah, I really agree with that. The movie should have thought about why Spider-Man is Spider-Man. The other 2 films did. This one, I guess, just wants to be a fanboy of Stark, and call me crazy, that's not what I think Spider-Man is about. I would like to see more depth. I would like to see it go darker. I'd much rather have a Spider-Man movie go all the way and take risks, because if you don't take risks, you're not gonna be big, you're not gonna be epic, you're not gonna be daring. Yeah, the other movies had problems but took chances, and they seemed larger because of it. Even though it didn't always work out, they knew they had to try something big and daring with a character who's so big and daring. So overall, SpiderMan Homecoming is a lot of fun, and it is charming, and it is funny, and I enjoyed it a great deal. But there's no way I can say this is the definitive Spider-Man, this is the one that gets it right. It's got the lighthearted feel with a lot of charm, but not much more. And Spider-Man is much more. But like I said, Spider-Man fans seem to love the hell out of it, regular moviegoers seem to love the hell out of it, so maybe I'm missing something. I still had a great time and really recommend it, but in terms of representing one of the greatest superheroes who's been around for years and years, I think we still got a long way to go before this Spider-Boy becomes a Spider-Man. So with all the pointless sequels that Pixar has been making recently, Finding Dory once again seems like exactly that, a pointless sequel. Yeah, I guess it is. I mean, there's nothing in this movie that's gonna make me look at Finding Nemo any differently. But for a film that doesn't need to exist, I found it surprisingly charming, funny, and even kinda touching. It just takes a few minutes to get there. The movie opens up with Dory from the last film suddenly remembering her family. She's shocked by this because she never remembers her family. In fact, even the first film she said, "Where is her family?" She takes this as a sign that she has to go exploring to locate them. This takes us through honestly a very rushed paced intro that has a lot of pointless chase scenes that aren't really that exciting, and truth be told, I really thought this wasn't gonna work based on the first 10 minutes. But when Dory gets to an aquarium, Sigourney Weaver's aquarium, yeah, you'll have to see the movie to get that, she comes across all sorts of colorful characters and yes, the leadings to where her parents might be. She comes across a whale friend who she apparently did learn whale from, an octopus that can blend into any environment and wants to escape, and even Nemo and his dad follow her to try to help her out, and they also come across a bunch of colorful characters. The funny thing is, unlike the first film where the threat was sharks or jellyfish or any other kind of monsters, in this film the main threat seems to be anxiety. Dory's insecurity constantly gets the best of her, and when she gets lost or she doesn't know what's going on, you see her start to fall apart. Honestly, these are both the best and most stressful parts of the movie. We see this both as an outsider, just seeing her crumble, not knowing what to do, and from her own point of view, where she just freezes and everything seems to be a blur and time seems to move fast and stay still at the same time. These scenes are very cleverly done. But on top of that, it also has the great visuals that you would associate with the first Finding Nemo movie. The ocean looks gorgeous, these creatures look gorgeous, the aquarium, what a great new location! It has a lot of great jokes and it's just visually stunning. I have my doubts that this character, who has a supporting role in the last movie, could hold her own film, but it surprisingly really works. Because it does dive into her real struggles and shows what she's going through, and that, regardless, she keeps trying, and yes, even keeps on swimming. There's a likable optimism that you can look up to, but then also this incredible fear that you can relate to as well. In a lot of movies, when a character freezes, you just say, "Oh, come on, go, get out of there, stop standing around doing nothing." But here, you understand why. It shows why, and you get it. What I like too is even though the movie does repeat a few elements from the first film, it still kind of feels like its own thing while still being a true sequel. I feel like that can be summed up in the climax. The climax is funny, where the original was really serious. This one is not only really goofy, but it has such a strange choice for a song and such a weird slow-mo way of doing it that you can't help but smile with a goofy grin on your face. It's so odd, but it's enjoyably odd. It's a movie that surprisingly won me over, and I'd be more than happy to watch several times in the future. On a side note, I noticed in one of these scenes where Dory is swimming around, there's Herbie in the background. And you can see, it's clearly Herbie, it's the love bug. Well, this just got me thinking. Remember that one movie where he's trying to throw himself off a bridge like the car is trying to commit suicide? Am I the only one freaked out that this confirms he finally did it? Was the Lindsay Lohan movie really received that bad? I don't know, I'm just pointing out that Disney can have a sick sense of humor. I love it, more please. While the first Finding Nemo is technically a better movie in both technology, character, and story, this one's a little bit more fun. I like the visuals, I like the goofy sense of humor, and again, I like the way they show anxiety. There's so many creative approaches in this movie that I really have a lot of fun with. So, if you like the first one, swim on in and check out the second. You surprisingly might have a good time. Recess School's Out is a strange contradiction of a film. First of all, the title makes no sense. If school is out, how can there be recess? Movie ruined. Second, I kind of figured the Saturday morning TV show it was based on was centered around, well, recess. Kids getting together, goofing around, getting into all sorts of silly antics, upsetting adults, so on and so forth. And if that's what the show is like, then that's definitely not reflected that much in the movie. The movie opens with a military base being broken into, and all these guys break in and they shock the guards, and this guy with a cane comes in and he's using this satellite to control the moon, and what the hell kind of movie did I get into? On the one hand, I say to myself, this kind of insanity might actually be kind of fun, but it never quite goes far enough for it to be really, really funny. There's one or two funny moments and one or two funny lines, but a lot of it sadly just comes across as a generic kid's adventure. So after that James Bond intro, we get a poorly rendered CGI opening of the school. Thank God there's only one more of these in the movie. Where all our main characters, as well as all the other kids in the school, are being let out for summer vacation. Our main lead, TJ, is once again getting under the skin of his principal, Mr. Prickly, played by Dabney Coleman. TJ is excited because he gets to hang out all summer with his friends, but it looks like all his friends are going to different various camps. Space camp, performing arts camp, wrestling camp, and so forth. When he thinks he has to spend the summer all by himself, he realizes that something strange is going on at the school. A weird green light is coming from the windows, and when he peeks inside, it looks like a laser beam is being created. He goes to the cops, who of course don't believe him, so he has no choice but to get all his friends out of their various camps to help him out. It looks like the organization making the beam is led by a villain played by James Woods. For he has a plan to get revenge on Principal Prickly, as well as destroy Recess forever so that test scores can go up, and people will hail him as the greatest mind ever, maybe even make him president. Okay, so on the surface, that kinda sounds like a funny plot, like it's so absurd and so something a kid would come up with that it could be entertaining. And like I said before, parts are. Every once in a while there's a funny line or a funny idea, and the villain's details in how he's gonna get rid of Recess is so funny, I won't even spoil it for you. It's just beautifully ridiculous. But sadly the script needed a lot more humor. A lot of the jokes are just kind of very basic jokes, and half the time they're not even making them. Like, they're running down the hallway and they come across ninjas, and that's just kind of it. The ninjas don't do anything funny, they don't say anything funny, they're not a special kind of ninja, they're just run-of-the-mill ninjas. And a lot of the action scenes, jokes, and characters are kind of along the same lines, they're just kind of generic. I really want to like these kids, it seems like they have very defined personalities, but they just don't do anything that interesting in this film. I want to see funny things at wrestling camp, I want to see funny things at space camp, I want to see this goofy villain do really crazy goofy things on top of the weird plan he has, but I don't know if they ran out of time to write it or throw in more jokes, but a lot of it comes off as just kind of boring. There is kind of a nice lesson connecting TJ and the principal, showing that not all adults are against kids, they were once kids too. In fact, seeing how many adults come together to fight for recess, it's actually kind of a cool thing. I think scenes like this, and even a really nice speech that the principal makes about the importance of recess, will probably resonate the most with kids and adults. But aside from that, they just kind of do the kid spy adventure thing that every other kid spy adventure does. Nothing really that new is added or that many funny elements thrown in. And even when there is a legit emotional moment, it's very brief and doesn't carry the film. Seeing how I never watched the show, I have no idea if this is an accurate portrayal of what it was like, or if fans of the show would like this. My guess is kids would find it okay and parents would get through it alright. But I don't know how good the rewatchability is aside from just having something on in the background. I guess it's silly to be harsh on it because there's nothing really awful in it, there's no bad lessons, there's no jokes that make you want to go nuts or yell at the screen. But at the same time, this seems like kind of a fun idea, just showing what recess is like and this group of friends and how they work off each other. Or if you're gonna go for this big crazy plot about this evil mastermind, go all out! You have James Woods as your villain, the funniest part of Hercules. He's a funny voice actor, make him funny! As is, it's just kind of a run-of-the-mill adventure. If you have a nostalgic connection and you don't need that much extra to get into these characters and their stories, fair enough. But this is a playtime where I'm not exactly dreading the bell. It's the first official Star Wars spin-off movie! Well, okay, we've had a couple before, but the first one to be shown on the big screen. Okay, maybe this isn't as big a deal as I thought, but it's the first live-action one to be shown on big screen. Star Wars Rogue One focuses on the mission to get the secret plans that blow up the Death Star. Oh, thank God, I'm finally gonna see what a Bothan looks like. What? It's the first one? Oh, I want to see a Bothan! Okay, so the story, as best as I can tell, because it is very difficult to tell because it jumps around a lot, a young girl's family is killed by the Empire. Years later, she grows up, gets captured by the Empire, but then gets saved by the Rebellion, and they offer her to join. Why? Because her father, it turns out, is the one who's designing the Death Star. While her focus is more to get him back alive, the Rebellion's focus is more to get the plans that show how the Death Star is made and how to destroy it. Being joined by a colorful band of characters, by characters I mean one, yeah okay, 1.5, they set out to retrieve the plan, save her father, and of course die because you know exactly how this is gonna turn out. But that's okay, if they make the characters enjoyable and likable, it'll be all the more tragic and, yeah, not really. Well, let me put it this way, the characters aren't unlikable in any way. I mean, there's nobody that came on screen and I just said, oh god, not this person. It's just, well, they're all kind of boring. Or even just weird. The person who raised our main character, I think raised her anyway, again, not all that clear, not only has a very strange voice, but has a very odd scene with this squid monster that can read minds and it never seems to go anywhere. There's a lot of scenes kinda like that, where people will kinda be flying from planet to planet doing weird thing after weird thing, and it never seems to amount to much. Mostly because while the characters' motivations are clear, there's not really that much charm to them. The only two, like I said before, I actually do kind of remember are the robot, who again is snarky and comedic. I'm kind of getting sick of these robots. How about a robot villain? Didn't they do that in one of the LucasArts games? Anyway, and the other is this blind guy who puts all his faith in the Force. Literally, all his faith. He lets it guide him, he lets him know where stormtroopers are so he can whack them with a big stick. I guess the Ewoks could do it, why not him? Big sticks, watch out Empire. And I almost threw his friend on there too, who's always trying to look after him, but he really doesn't have much of a character either. His only likable personality trait is that he knows this guy, and he's with him. I don't really know that much about him outside of that. To make things even worse, the villain is boring. You really feel like you could have given like this really creepy, disturbing kind of Empire villain, but they just resurrect another one to do that. For some reason at the time, if you said the CG looked awkward, everybody just thumped on you. They couldn't believe that you thought that, but guys, really look at this. It's already starting to become dated. Don't get me wrong, it's good, but there's still that uncanny valley there, particularly around the lips. Like a lot of people, I would have liked it more if you just saw his reflection in the glass, but if they want to do this all the way, okay, I guess it's kind of cool to see Van Helsing back from the dead the more I think about it. But okay, those are my problems with the movies, and granted they are big problems, but let's talk about the good stuff. This is the first Star Wars movie where I really felt like I was there. Something about the way they shoot it, something about the pacing, something about the way it really lets you kind of sit in these environments. It's not always shot really showy, it's shot kind of matter of fact. There's a really great shot when they see a Star Destroyer in the air and it kind of tilts up and you just really feel like you're looking at it from a great distance. The action sequences are also legitimately good, especially at the end. These may be some of the best space battles that have ever been in Star Wars. Honestly, I think a lot of people's enjoyment of this movie is the final act because the action is not only so good, but it's aggressive and it feels real. It feels like an actual war movie. It is called Star Wars. It's nice that it finally feels like an actual war. Also, I've gone on and on about how phenomenal this last 2 minutes of Darth Vader is. If you haven't seen it, I won't spoil a thing, just check it out. It's really awesome. When this movie came out, audiences were kinda split, though not really die hard. The people who disliked it didn't hate it, they just thought it was kinda generic. The people who liked it though, loved the hell out of it. I sort of sat around wondering why that could be, and I think it finally hit me. Because the characters are not unlikable or annoying or a pain in the ass like in some other Star Wars movies, and the fact that it's shot in such a realistic warlike environment, I think people feel like they're putting themselves in those roles. They're left just blank slate-ish enough that they can feel like they're really in the action, and the action is gritty and real. I think both Star Wars fans and action movie fans want to feel like they're a fly on the wall, either listening to this conversation by the Empire, or feeling like they're one of the people running on the beach getting an adrenaline rush as things are firing at you. I guess it's kind of the Saving Private Ryan of Star Wars films if you want to put it that way. And honestly, I'm totally down for that. I love those elements about this movie. I just wish that the characters were a lot more interesting. I wanted to want what they want. I wanted to fear what they fear. I wanted their passion, but it just doesn't look like they had any passion either. The acting is always so stilted and dry, and the dialogue is always very straightforward. I can go on and on about the personality of the original Star Wars characters, but these guys, not so much. Still, I am kind of a sucker for really good environments and nice action, and yeah, when the characters from the Star Wars movies do come in, it is kind of cool. It feels like it captures their voice pretty well. I like the idea of a darker, harsher Star Wars story. I just want it done more with people that you can connect with. And maybe that's why so many changes were made to the movie, as a lot of articles say. Maybe the characters were too likable. Maybe we did enjoy them too much. You know they're gonna die, and you want people to come back to this movie, so you shouldn't make them too interesting. Just enough to feel sad, but satisfied enough to come back and see it again. But I don't know. I have no idea what went into making this movie. All I can comment on is the final product. And what we got is okay. The cool scenes are really friggin' cool. You just gotta wade through a lot of okay stuff to get to it. But I know a lot of people who love this movie, so maybe you'll be one of them. There's only one way to know for sure. Fly on in and check it out. The Lizzie McGuire movie. Sure, okay. I mean, Lizzie McGuire was a big part of Disney's identity and made a star out of Hilary Duff, and yeah, it seemed to be a big enough hit show that got its own film, so why not take a look at it? As I'm sure you're no doubt surprised to discover, Lizzie McGuire was not a show I really watched. I think I have some general understanding what it was about, though. It's about a girl named Lizzie. She goes through her life in high school, dreaming about boys, and being clumsy because that's how writers who don't know how to write humor for a girl write. And she's followed around by a little cartoon version, I think, of her. Nobody else seems to see her, and she just kind of mimics what she's saying, so I guess that could be interesting. I guess I'm not really surprised at the film I got, as it seems very much geared towards girls that like to sort of have fantasies that girls like her have. Going to Rome, wearing nice outfits, being a pop star, falling in love with cute boys, all that stuff. And yeah, it does that, and not a whole bunch else. Exciting, I guess? Lizzie graduates junior high and goes on a big trip to Rome with her class. Her friend Gordo joins her along the way, but there's this very strict woman who seems to be in charge, played by Alex Bernstein. She's just as over the top as the Italian stereotypes they seem to come across around every corner. But wouldn't you know it, Lizzie just happens to look exactly like this pop star in Italy, and when someone the pop star used to date sees that, he tells her that he needs her help. She, of course, has to impersonate her and wear all her fabulous clothes and be in the lifestyle of a famous person because it's kind of a weird reason. They broke up, but he still cares about her, and she doesn't really sing her song. She lip syncs, and he doesn't want that to ruin her or get sued, so she has to kind of lip sync at an award show. It's super odd and doesn't make a lot of sense, but as the story goes on, you kind of figure out it's not supposed to. Yeah, I won't give it away if you haven't seen it. She pretends that she's sick so she can constantly sneak out and be with the boy to learn how to lip sync and how to be fabulous, and of course, maybe a little bit of a romance blooms. So, yeah, a film like this is really not going to interest me. It's going to interest girls at that same age who like the idea of traveling and singing and outfits and pop stars and cute boys. And if that's your thing, this is a tolerable movie. Half the actors once again are over the top, and the main leads are supposed to be so likable and generic that you're supposed to associate yourself as them, so they don't really leave that big an impact, but that's kinda why they're there. You're supposed to imagine yourself as those characters. The cartoon, I don't really see the point of. It's not in there much, and when it is, it's not really adding anything. If it was something like Garfield where they can't hear the cat but he had really good commentary, that'd be one thing. Or if it was something like Inside Out where the reactions were so big and so over the top and so funny, that would be something. But it's just kind of a Dr. Katz version of her screaming or saying something that she already said. I guess as a little kid I would like that, but there's not really a lot of it anyway. So I don't really see the point outside of they do it in the show. Every once in a while there's a small giggle, like I really enjoy it when she's trying on these different dresses that kind of look Lady Gaga-ish, and I don't even know if Lady Gaga was around yet, so maybe it was ahead of its time. The little brother is so determined to constantly make her look bad that sometimes that gets a little bit of a laugh out of me too. But outside of that, there's really not much else. There is kind of a nice surprise about one of the characters at the end that I will admit I didn't see coming, and I do enjoy it when those kind of things happen. But I don't know if that's really enough to recommend an entire movie for that. The film seems made just for fans of Lizzie McGuire, and I guess that makes sense. You can't really fault it for that, it's giving the audience exactly what it wants. I do wish there was more clever commentary with the inner thoughts of the cartoon, or maybe more about growing up and what it's like to travel in different cultures and such. But honestly, I wasn't really expecting to get that, and I don't think anyone else is either. If you're not a Lizzie McGuire fan, this isn't gonna sway you, but if you enjoy watching the show, I get a feeling you'll like this fine. There's pretty shots of Rome, a good lesson here or there. It's not bad, it's just forgettable and generic. Unless you grew up with Lizzie McGuire, in which case I'm sure he's giving you exactly what you like. If you like the show, check it out. If not, go watch Inside Out again. When I talk with people, it almost seems like there's a little bit of a rivalry between the movies Tangled and Frozen. I guess everyone just has their CG princess movie that they connect with more. Well, now you can add Moana into the mix, because I know so many folks that just fell in love with this movie. I guess it makes sense. You have one that takes place in an average fairy tale environment, another one that takes place in a winter environment, and now you have one that takes place in a very warm environment. Each one has a location that people want to escape to. But Moana has a lot more going for it outside of just its location. Our main lead is the daughter of an island chief who's trying to train for when she becomes chief. Big surprise though, her heart yearns for more, and she wants to go exploring, but the people very much don't want to leave because they're afraid of the dangers out there. When she discovers in the past that her people were explorers, she decides to set out on her own to see what she can discover. Well, that and hopefully save the world. You see, a powerful force has been corrupted and is turning everything black and dead. One of the only salvations, which also happens to be the cause of all of this, is Maui, played by The Rock. He apparently stole something from this powerful force, and that's what's setting all this terribleness in motion. Moana, of course, meets up with Maui, and they're about as opposite as they can be, her being very tiny and hopeful, and him being very, well, big and full of himself. Together they come across all sorts of weird creatures, bizarre environments, and eventually the evil force to try and stop it. So, truth be told, I didn't quite connect with this movie like I did with Tangled and Frozen, but it's still a very enjoyable movie. The animation is phenomenal, the environment looks beautiful. A lot of the creatures, especially the villain at the end, just look amazing. And on top of that, you have some really hummable songs that aren't going to leave your head anytime soon. I guess the issues I have is that while there are a lot of Disney cliches that some people are okay with, I find there's some that people start to get tired of as well. And don't get me wrong, Tangled and Frozen are filled with Disney cliches. They're just the Disney cliches I don't mind as much. I get when people say they're sick of the dead parent, they're sick of the curses, they're sick of castles and pretty dresses and falling in love with handsome guys. I understand that. For me, they're not quite as bad because there's so many other cool creative things in it. Moana is the same way with a lot of people. There's so much good stuff that people connect with that they really overlook the other cliches. For me though, these cliches I'm just done with. The main character that has to stay in one spot but wants to journey, wants to listen to her heart. The wise parent or grandparent that passes away yet comes back as a ghost at the end to give some sound advice. The cute little comic relief that doesn't talk, or should I say, 1.5 comic reliefs. There's this pig that kinda disappears, why was it even in the movie? The comedy as well is okay, but it just didn't make me laugh as much as Tangled or Frozen. The Rock especially, I was really ready to laugh a lot at, and yeah, I got a few chuckles, he was charming enough, but there was nothing I was really laughing that hard at apart from his song, You're Welcome. It also really bothers me that pretty much everything in this movie is his fault, and at the end, all he does is just kind of bow his head and kick his heel and say I'm sorry, and that like excuses everything. It didn't even really look like he meant it, and yet somehow he gets a big reward out of all this. Even the big transformation that happens at the end, while done beautifully, I would have liked a little bit more focus on. I would have liked to have seen more what this creature was like before it was turned into this dark, terrible thing and what changes it back. I guess I feel like all the ingredients are there and they mix well, just not great. I wanted to be more invested, I wanted to laugh harder, I wanted to really be sucked into the drama. Maybe the familiarities that they have are just a little too familiar for me. But But with that said, like a lot of their other modern fairy tales, they kind of make a few changes too that are very welcomed. For example, Moana and Maui don't get together, they're not even romantically interested in each other. That's refreshing, because I'm watching these two, I'm thinking they work fine off each other. If they're gonna have them suddenly kiss at the end, it wouldn't make any sense. And they don't do that. I guess it's something that they advertise a lot that Moana's technically not a princess.
I'm not a princess. I'm the daughter of the chief.
I don't know, that's not gonna stop her from being in all the princess lineups. I still don't 100% know how Mulan got in there. But like I said before, I can't act like the other Disney movies I like don't rely on a lot of familiar cliches. They're just cliches that don't bother me that much. For others, these are cliches that maybe drive them nuts, and the cliches in this film maybe don't. For me, I would have liked a few more surprises and changes in such a familiar story, but for a lot of people, these are the elements they really like in a lot of Disney movies, and I totally get that. So yeah, it's a good flick. I can't in any way say it's bad, just sometimes a little standard. But like I said, you've come to expect that with Disney films, and maybe this kind of standard you'll like more than the other kind of standards. I definitely say check it out because the people that like it really seem to like it. There's just some kind of really strong connection to the changes they make, but the stuff they keep the same. I guess it's a perfect combination of the familiarity they love, but the updates they want too. So whether you find it okay or absolutely fall in love with it, it's an adventure worth setting sail to experience. Incredibles 2 is one of those sequels I didn't know I wanted to see. Oh, don't get me wrong, like everyone, I wanted an Incredibles sequel. But after so many years of waiting, I kinda wanted to see the family a little grown up. Maybe the parents are even older, Violet's going to college, Dash is going to high school, Jack enters kindergarten while also discovering his powers and whether or not he should use them. Like, this is some really interesting stuff. Like I always try to tell myself though, I should focus more on what the movie is rather than what it isn't. And Incredibles 2 is a really great superhero sequel. It starts literally where the last film left off, with a supervillain attacking the city and the Incredibles going to try to stop him. Unfortunately, I guess like the old days, they cause more destruction than they stop. And they don't even get the villain, and the villain never even comes back in the movie. I love that. Sometimes the bad guy wins and you just gotta deal. The family is bummed because it looks like they had to go back to not using their powers and going in hiding again, but an eccentric pair of millionaire siblings see possibility in them. They want to rebrand superheroes and try to make them open to the public again, not have to hide. It looks like Elastigirl may be the best one to win the public over, and so she's sent on a bunch of missions while Mr. Incredible has to stay home with the kids. Things get even tougher though when a hypnotizing villain named the Screenslaver, God I love that name, starts taking over people's minds and vows to destroy our superheroes. Okay, so from hearing this plot you might think there's a lot of repeat. Honestly, when I heard this was the story, I kinda got angry. I can't believe we're doing just kind of a Mr. Mom thing here. But what the movie does, which I really felt the first film was missing, is it focuses more on the family as a group. Yes, there's another parent that's gone a lot, but it really shows all the different dilemmas and problems that are going on in each family member's life. In the first film, with the exception of Mr. Incredible, everyone just had very generic problems. They were just trying to fit in and be unique. Any other details, like trying to get a boyfriend's attention or trying to avoid the teacher, were just kind of done in one little scene. Here, they really go into the problem of their everyday lives and they all have to work together to get through it. Even if one of those problems is dealing with a family member not being there. But even then, they know the importance and they try to be supportive, and we don't go through that scene where somebody just cracks and yells at the other saying, "Oh, man's role, woman's role." No, they all just kind of do their thing. It's tough, but they find a way. And thankfully, it isn't just a good family drama, it's a good superhero movie too. Some of these action sequences are amazing. The scene where Elastigirl has to chase down this train while also having this bike that can split apart and she stretches with it, it's just so beautifully done. And speaking of beautiful, the film looks beautiful. I remember the first movie having this kind of idea that all the color would be sucked out because all the color is sucked out of their lives, but here, there is so much color and it pops off the screen. I think because there has been so many years away, it did allow them to learn how to make the images even more striking. And we also get more of Frozone, and we also get more of these new superheroes, and oh god, this is just really good. It's just a solid, good movie that does exactly what it's supposed to do and more. There is, however, one problem with the film that the first one did a lot better, and that's the villain. Can you guess what the problem is? It's the same problem with pretty much every Disney movie now. It's kept a secret. So there's a big twist that's not really a twist at all. Everybody could see it coming, but it's supposed to be like this big reveal. And it's usually just a boring character with a really overcomplicated backstory that nobody cares about. I guess to the first one's credit, there was a little bit of a surprise revealing the villain too, but it happens halfway, and the villain was big and funny and over the top, and he seemed like a comic book villain. This one seems like a modern Disney villain. We don't even really get the cool gadgets or gears that we associate with superhero villains. It's just kind of this person that's angry, puts out this big diabolical scheme, and is instantly forgettable. I feel like so many of these Disney movies now are trying to add this sympathetic backstory, but because it's always done as a twist near the end, we can't really get to sympathize with the villain because we don't even know what the villain is up to or who the villain is until the end. So yeah, that part sucked, and it is a shame that it's such a big part, the villain. But honestly, the things that are supposed to be really great about it, the unique element of family being a bunch of superheroes, is really focused on. And they balance out wonderfully. I can be just as invested in Elastigirl trying to stop a bad guy as Jack fighting a raccoon in the backyard. Both are incredibly creative, amazingly animated, and work because we really like these characters. I usually hate babies in movies. They always bring the movie to a standstill, but this is a funny baby. Everyone constantly trying to figure out what his powers are while he's trying to figure out what his powers are but can't talk. He's just a baby, but he can turn to this giant and set on fire. It's just great. This is one of the few Disney sequels I actually like more than the first one. I like it because it doesn't mostly focus on Mr. Incredible. It feels like everybody gets equal screen time. Every time it cut to a different character, there was never a part of me that said, oh no, we're focusing on this person, I can't stand this character. No, I love them all. And I love them all together. I love seeing how they work off of their different powers, different personalities, it just all works. Sure, I wish the villain was a lot better, but everything else is so good, I can easily overlook it. Incredibles 2 is an incredible sequel, so go check it out if you haven't already. Wendy Wu Homecoming Warrior. Boy, that's a Disney Channel original movie title if ever I've heard one. This martial arts team rom-com sounds absolutely ridiculous, and yeah, it is, but it's also surprisingly charming and funny and actually kinda likable. Don't get me wrong, it's got some bad moments. Yeah, some laughably bad moments, but we'll get to them in a bit. A teenage monk is sent from his home to look for a reincarnated warrior. Assuring them he won't fail, they assure him that he's not the one he needs to worry about. For indeed, this ancient warrior is a teenage girl who is more obsessed with becoming homecoming queen than anything else. When the boy shows up, he clearly doesn't know how to blend in and she gets freaked out by him. But when an evil master overlord something or other starts taking over people's bodies and starts using martial arts on everybody, she finally starts to listen to the boy and he convinces her that she's the only hope. This of course means she has to learn martial arts, he has to learn the wacky ways of blending in to be a common teenager, and they have to do all this while preparing to be the homecoming queen. Yeah, you've heard this pretty stupid story before. It's kind of like Kung Fu Panda meets High School Musical. And indeed, a lot of this writing could very easily be portrayed in an either too corny way or too selfish way or annoying way. But thankfully, the direction really takes its time, having some quiet moments and some softer moments and even some funny moments. The actors are all really likable and have a really good chemistry off each other, particularly the family. And even though some of these characters are kind of archetypes, they're played a little bit more creatively. The jerky kids in this, for example, aren't just there to be the jerky kids. They're legitimately kind of funny and goofy, and I laugh at them every once in a while. I especially like this one girl who also wants to be homecoming queen, but she doesn't do the typical Disney bully thing where she calls her names or anything. It's all kind of these passive-aggressive compliments that are actually pretty funny. Wendy Wu herself is actually kind of a selfish character, but again, she plays it with enough charm and relatability that you're still for the most part on her side, and you laugh at her antics. The one point where it does start to get a little much though is the climax. First of all, there's a really dumb decision made by the main character, and after all that we've been watching her do and learn and stuff, you just don't buy it. They're always teaching her about her destiny and kind of this end of the world stuff, and when you see the choice she makes at first, it's really not believable. But thankfully it doesn't take long and we get to our big climax, and while the martial arts is pretty cool in it, there's a lot of silly stuff. For example, the monster possesses this girl and she has the deep monster voice, and a lot of times this thing is actually kind of intimidating because he goes from body to body and it's kind of like It Follows. It's kind of creepy the way that he or she or whoever it is kind of following her. But then when you hear this girl talk with this deep menacing voice, it's just kind of ridiculous. On top of that, a lot of the slow-mo in this movie is actually effectively done. I feel like they show the really cool stuff to slow down and make it look impressive. But the downside is a lot of the time, you can clearly see the stunt people, and they look nothing like the actors. Look at this, couldn't they crop it just a little bit or not slow down this part? There must have been a better way to edit this so that you don't see that. Any other problems I have are kind of nitpicks. For example, there's a scene where the boy offers them these little pies and the father doesn't want to eat them, and we find out later it's because he feels like he's a little homesick and he realizes he should think more about his Chinese culture, and the wife agrees, and it kind of doesn't go anywhere. Admittedly, it's a nice scene because these actors do it so well, but from a writing standpoint, it doesn't really lead to much. Once in a while, too, the boy can act a little weird. I don't know if his accent is too thick or his inflections are a little odd, but honestly, for the most part, he's pretty charming and works out okay. And like I said, this movie does surprisingly have a lot of charm. I like the creativity around a lot of these scenarios. For example, the first big martial arts fight is actually done in silence because they don't want to wake the girl up. Admittedly, the boy should want to wake the girl up so that she can run away, but this is still pretty funny. So yeah, this isn't anything great, but for a little movie with some martial arts and a couple of jokes and likable people, I think it's totally fine. It's a very by-the-book story, but as these by-the-book stories go, I found myself legitimately enjoying it, and I think a lot of kids and even grown-ups will too. It's silly, sure, but it's an enjoyable, even kind of impressive silly. Like I said, the martial arts, it's pretty damn well done, especially for a Disney Channel movie, and I really like watching these characters. Take a look and get a kick out of it yourself. We did it! We defeated racism! And all it took was Black Panther! Finally, a black superhero, we've seen that before, but a big budget comic book movie with a lot of black people in it, we've seen that before, but it made a lot of money, yeah. And it's actually so good the Oscars tried to create a new category so that they could give it an Oscar! This is getting kind of weird. Okay, years from now you might be looking back at this saying, what the hell was I talking about? But the hype around this movie was crazy, both before and especially after it came out. People act like this was the Schindler's List of superhero films, like there was never anything better, will never be anything better. We did it, we reached perfection. And me, being the sniveling jerk-off that I am, of course had to go, yeah, it's good. I might even go see it again. I say that not because I saw anything majorly wrong with the film, but I saw it almost reaching that epic level and kind of pulling back at the last minute. Which is fine, it's still a good movie, I just never quite got on the bandwagon like everyone else. As you probably remember from Civil War, Black Panther is a superhero who tries to fight for justice. It also turns out he's a prince though, who's now being appointed to king. From where, you may ask? The land of Wakanda. A technologically advanced superworld whose technology is kept from the rest of the Earth. Why? They feel the world is not ready for such technology and that mankind is just a little too, well, goddamn crazy. Wakanda seems to have crime as well, but its culture is a lot heavier and the people seem a lot more peaceful. That is, until an enemy from the past named Killmonger comes around, played by Michael B. Jordan. One of the best, if not the best, Marvel villain we've ever gotten. He thinks Wakanda should not only open its doors to the rest of the world, but it should invade, attack, kill those who abuse the power they have. As the story goes on, we find out he actually has the possibility of becoming king, and challenges Black Panther to a duel. For such a peaceful culture, it's a very strange way of working your government. From there, of course, there's action, technology, sidekicks, big armies, all that cool stuff. There's easily a lot to like in this film. Number one, again, being for me, the villain. He's very identifiable, you know why he's doing what he's doing, and you even almost agree to it. Like many great villains, he just goes that one step too far, but you're kind of following him on all the other steps, or at least you identify with where he's coming from. His acting is so great too. You get an idea that this guy from the streets wouldn't really fit in with this cast that talks really big and epic and has this grand language. But he just walks in like he always owned the place and immediately takes command and charge, and he's just amazing. Truth be told, the side characters really upstage the main character in this, which I think is kind of a problem. Not that the main character is bad or unlikable or annoying or anything, he's just kinda dull. He's not really Black Panther that often. You don't see him go through that much of a huge journey in terms of learning what it means to be king and getting responsibility and so forth. He just kinda seems like the nice guy trying to do the right thing. Which is fine, but the movie is called Black Panther. I want to know more about Black Panther. I want to find him more interesting. There's a scene where he's at his lowest point and he's practically banished. Some even think he's dead, and I thought, well, this will be like a great Moses story. He'll go through all this realization and he'll go through the spiritual journey and he'll come back and he'll learn a lot. And I guess he kinda does, but they don't really put that much focus on it. Again, I remember the side characters' journeys through this moment more than I do his journey. The effects of this movie are also not very good, surprisingly. That is to say, Wakanda looks amazing. Anytime they cut to the city, it just looks phenomenal. I'm assuming this is where all the money for the CG effects went because the rest of the CG looks really bad. Thank God this movie does have interesting ideas and characters, because if it just relied on the action, that really wouldn't fly. Even the big climax, if they really want to make this huge, they would have had Black Panther and Killmonger like on the top of a tall temple fighting against a sunset, something crazy like that. But no, it's on these fake looking train tracks and it just looks stupid. This isn't epic, this is if Marvel did straight to DVD movies. And even the big battle happening above with the side characters doesn't seem especially epic because some of their motivations we don't even get, or the connections with other characters. I mean, there's a scene where the Captain of the Guards has to take on like the new Captain of the Guards, and they had kind of a connection, but they didn't really dive into it much. So yeah, I wanted to be 100% on board with this. I wanted to shout, this is epic, this is huge. But a lot of those little distractions did constantly get in the way for me. I feel like if they cut out a few other elements, like maybe the Andy Serkis character, we could have had more time to focus on these people and sort of relate to them even more. But again, the ones we do relate to, we really relate to. And the issues and problems they bring up are good issues and problems, and they lead to a lot of interesting questions. I also do get where people are coming from when they say this is an important movie, because yeah, there are movies out there, comic book movies that star black people, but not usually this many and not on such a grand scale, so it is nice to get that representation. But I don't think that makes it an instant masterpiece when there are very obviously some clear problems with it. Not god-awful problems, but enough to take notice. Nevertheless, this is still a very enjoyable movie, and does do things a little differently than other Marvel films, at least in terms of the issues and ideas it brings up. It still ends with a traditional Marvel climax, it still has the typical Marvel jokes, but the look is very different, the culture is very different, and like I said before, some of these dilemmas are very different. It's still a really good movie, and I really recommend it. I want to see even more, in fact. I'd love to see a Black Panther 2, 3, 4. I'd love to see more of these characters. I'd love to see how they develop. Like I said, I didn't really feel Black Panther himself was all that interesting. Maybe we can really make him interesting. Maybe we can find out even more about him and what kind of guy he is. So I'd say check it out, but let's face it, you already have checked it out. But go ahead and check it out a few more times to see what works, see what doesn't, and hopefully get a lot of Black Panther sequels in the future. The Last Jedi, the biggest Star Wars film to win all fans over since Phantom Menace? Yeah, I definitely want to review this film again because man, the reaction this movie got was crazy. I mean, don't get me wrong, every Star Wars film apart from the first one has gotten some kind of backlash. When they first came out, a lot of people were against Empire, Jedi, even the Christmas special, I ask you! So I guess you can't act too shocked that there's people that don't like this movie. I mean, there's plenty of reasons why, but man, I'm just waiting for Rian Johnson to get in a car accident and some fan has him in a bed and forces him to rewrite the script. Me personally, when I first saw it, I absolutely loved a lot of it and had some problems with other parts. Overall, I remember it being a really good experience. But I'm not gonna lie, the more and more I think back on it, the more and more problems do arise. Well, let's talk about the story, as well as look at the good stuff, because weirdly enough, this movie is kind of divided into two. It's very easy, in my opinion, to point out what the good stuff is and the bad stuff is. The good stuff. Rey finds Luke Skywalker, but he has no interest in training her. In fact, he even tosses the lightsaber behind him. Many fans were shocked by this and astonished that he was so bitter and cold and abandoned everybody, kinda like they said he did in the first film, and one of the most likable characters did too. Again, I can see people getting angry that this got in the way of the happily ever after optimistic point of view, but as soon as you see Han and Leia don't work out, I think it's pretty clear that's out the window. I just assumed this is what Luke would be doing. He would feel like he'd have to banish himself just like Yoda did. Why were people so shocked by this? Like a lot of stories about spiritual journeys, Rey decides not to leave and stays there until she's trained. While Luke technically refuses to train her, at least the traditional way, she does find out a lot of stuff by herself. The island holds many mysterious secrets, as Rey herself also holds many mysterious secrets, including somehow a way for the Force to connect both her and Kylo Ren. Neither are quite sure how they're doing it, but they're able to talk to one another and even sometimes bring a little bit of the environment back with them. That's actually rather intriguing. But then you have the other story though, which is, in my opinion, the bad stuff. The Resistance is on the run from the First Order, and it's just kind of a really long, drawn-out chase scene that I still don't entirely get. Why can't one go faster to catch up? It has more power. Through an even more confusing subplot, Finn and a new character named Rose have to travel to a different planet to find this code breaker that can break a board and somehow stop it, but they don't come across that code breaker, they come across another one, and while that's going on, Leia seems to be out of commission and Poe wants to know what's going on, but he's not being told for absolutely no reason? Even if you were to take out the details of the story, which do make absolutely no sense, a lot of these characters just aren't that interesting. I don't know why this really slow chase is supposed to be suspenseful. I don't know why this really boring casino is supposed to be interesting. I don't care why we're supposed to care about space horses? What? How did we get here? The two stories kinda come to a head in the last third, where they confront Snoke, and big shock, there's betrayals and backstabbing and lightsabers and giant machines shooting at each other and ships flying all around and all the usual Star Wars stuff. Without getting into spoilers, I think a lot of people agree the movie should have ended a half hour earlier, and most people agree on the exact same spot where it should have stopped. Now, that's not to say the climax isn't interesting or creative, but it does go on way too long, and on top of that, a lot of the mysteries and dilemmas seem to already be solved, and most of them aren't that satisfactory. Snoke, for example, we never find out about. And I know a lot of people say, well, he's like the Emperor, you didn't really know anything about him, but the Emperor wasn't mentioned in the first one. We just thought it was Darth Vader. And even when he does come along, you just know he's the guy calling the shots. Even Obi-Wan says that's kind of Darth Vader himself that turned himself to the dark side, so that was explained. Here, it said that Snoke did it. Well, okay, I don't need much, but just who was he? How did he come across this guy? How did he turn him? How did he know Luke? Just something. Give me something. A line of dialogue. I don't care, just a little bit. But then it's also strange because I never found Snoke that interesting, and honestly, a lot of these mysteries I thought was just gonna go the same usual route that Star Wars goes, like the Chosen One, or the Family Blood, or something like that. But they don't go that route, which at first I liked, but then I realized they don't really replace it with anything of substance. It's just kinda set up and then nothing is delivered. Not something different, just nothing. That's very odd, especially for a second movie that's supposed to be the second act of something, you know, where things are supposed to be getting interesting. There's twists and turns that lead to the third act, but nothing's really leading into the third movie apart from Rey and Kylo's connection, but it doesn't seem like a huge cliffhanger to see what's gonna happen with them. But okay, those are the downsides. The good sides? Pretty much anything with Rey, Luke, and Kylo Ren I love the shit out of. I adore all these characters. I know technically they don't even do that much until the third act, but they're just so interesting. I love hearing them talk and I love their dialogue. I can just watch them do nothing. It's so funny because the side story has so much shit going on, but because I don't really care about those characters, I don't get into it. With them, so little is going on, and yet they do it so well and so engaging, and they're so complex, and I just want to learn more and more about them. It also feels like they're evolving the idea of the Force as well. It always kind of seemed like the Force was one thing, and in the first 3 movies it seemed to evolve a little bit. You found out a few more tricks, but then it just kind of stayed the same. Well, unless you count blood tests, which most people don't. But you know the idea, the Force is around us, you lift your hand, you can move stuff and fly around, sometimes shoot lightning, things like that. Here, it seems like people who are really in touch with the Force can kind of experiment with it and push it in a new way. At first I didn't like that Rey wasn't taught by Luke, and yeah, there's also a little bit of a cheat with these books that you find later in the film. But then the more I thought about it, because she does have such a strong connection with it, she can take it in a new direction. She can kind of recreate it, reshift it, redefine it. It can become something really new. Even having the books I kind of like because it gives her the basics and she can figure out where to go from there and how to sort of morph and shift and experiment with it. It's the first time in a long time I got legitimately excited for an idea in Star Wars. On top of that, it's hands down the best looking Star Wars film. I mean, okay, some of these places could have been designed better, but the way it's shot, the epic poses, the way they have the sun, the way they're silhouetted, the way they stand, it all seems so gigantic. It's like an anime, some of those really good animes that seem so huge. But I don't think that's just the cinematography. I do think it's the characters, specifically Rey, Luke, and Kylo Ren. So looking back, it is a little bit more of a mixed bag than perhaps I remember. It is a little too complicated, a little too long, and probably explains too much, and what it does explain is not really that satisfactory. It's more leading us down one path and then suddenly leading us down a different one, but that new path doesn't really go anywhere. But I'll admit, the stuff I do like is some of my favorite stuff in any of the Star Wars films. It's the first time I can remember where I was watching a Star Wars movie and I had like butterflies in my stomach. I was afraid what was gonna happen. I didn't know what was gonna happen. I was excited for it. So yeah, pretty much everything done with Luke, Rey, Kylo Ren, and the Force, I really enjoy. Some of the best I've ever seen in any of the Star Wars flicks. The stuff done with Finn, Rose, the First Order, Snoke, and those things. I didn't think were the worst, they just weren't that good. It's nice to have it on Blu-ray because that means I can watch the best parts over and over and skip the parts that don't interest me, and miss very little. It's a good big screen movie for the visuals, but a good disc movie to rewatch the best parts and fast forward the blah ones. Goddamn right we're gonna talk about the Hannah Montana movie, because that's what 37-year-old men do! They talk about Hannah Montana! Like men! No regrets! Okay, that's not entirely true. There's quite a bit of regret, but surprisingly not as much as I thought. Hannah Montana, based on the mid-2000s show I've never seen, seems to follow the double life of a girl named Miley. She turned out to be a singing worldwide phenomenon, but her father, Robbie Ray, played by Miley Cyrus's dad, Billy Ray Cyrus, thinks it's unhealthy for someone so young to be in the spotlight all the time. So they create an alternate personality. Because that's much more healthy, right? That won't mess up a kid at all. In this kind of scenario, it's kind of like Clark Kent's glasses. All you need is a wig for suddenly everyone not to recognize her at all. From that setup alone, I guess I shouldn't be surprised how this movie opens up. It's a Hannah Montana concert and Miley can't get into her own concert because no one believes it's her. Yep, that's the kind of logic this film runs on. Of course, crazy antics and stunts and silliness ensue with this constantly going back and forth between normal life and celebrity. Again, totally not messing this girl up at all. But when her dad gets concerned about missing her best friend's party because she was in a fight with Tyra Banks, okay, I gotta admit that's a little funny. He takes her back to her farm home in the country to hopefully reconnect with her roots. That means no glamour, no riches, no press, no Hannah. But apparently this tabloid reporter is following her to get some dirt on her because her getting in a fight with Tyra Banks wasn't enough. So he hunts her down to find out some secrets because the magazine already has the cover ready, they just need to fill it with a story. Again, that's a little funny. What isn't so funny is every stock cliche that usually goes along with this idea. She constantly has to go back and forth between being Hannah and being Miley, and what a coincidence, there's a big get-together where she has to either go on a date with this boy she likes or she has to stop this big bad mall from being set up that's gonna destroy her hometown, and well, she can't go to both, and can't call the boyfriend to push the time back for some reason, so she has to run back and forth changing outfits and wigs, and oh god, this is dumb. So yeah, this film's written bad, like really bad. But surprisingly, it's not as horrible as you would think. Maybe because this was a theatrical release, there's a little bit more time to work things out. Because of that, the performances seem rather genuine, the pacing is pretty good, the slapstick isn't too over the top, there's not a ton of stupid sound effects, it's, how do I put it, not like a run-of-the-mill Disney Channel movie. A lot of the film is just her being on the farm and connecting with her dad and connecting with his new boyfriend and her family and trying to find herself, and yeah, I know that all sounds a little lame, but if it's done well, it's done well. Don't get me wrong, there's plenty of corny moments, but there's also a lot of silent moments too. And even when song numbers do pop up, it doesn't seem out of nowhere or too distracting. It kind of fits in the feel of the rest of the movie. Yeah, she sounds a little auto-tuned and the instrument's a little too professional for the settings half the time, but it's not like Camp Rock where suddenly there's a musical number. It's not like Gem and the Holograms where suddenly everyone sounds like it's not them singing at all. It just sounds so incredibly fake. It's just the right balance of a little corny, but kinda nice too. Which is kind of a good way to sum up this movie, despite it being written terribly. For example, during the scene where she has to go back and forth between restaurants during the date and her big get-together with the mayor, the script calls for her to be changing in a revolving door and then she runs into the boyfriend. Well, that's just run-of-the-mill stupid, but here there's kind of nice music and it's in slow-mo and she sees this little kid who recognizes her first and she doesn't know how to react, and then suddenly she comes across the boyfriend who sees her and all of a sudden everything is hitting her at the same time it's hitting him, and you see both their reactions, and it's actually a very interesting scene. It took a very silly moment and made it surprisingly reflective. Slowing things down, seeing her go in a circle while also seeing her own reflection can actually be kinda deep. But again, for a Hannah Montana movie. This is still a Disney movie selling a Disney pop star based on a Disney Channel product. But as those go, I can't say it's really bad, I can't say it's good either, but it's definitely better than it has any right to be. I like that it took its time, I like that there's quieter moments, I like that it focused on relationships, I like it's not all about the glam and celebrity, in fact the majority isn't even about that. A lot of it's just kinda chilling in farmland getting to know these unique characters. Does it have a lot of Disney Channel movie cliches? Yes, and do I wish it didn't? Hell yes. But at the same time, they're not done as bad as you would expect them to be. I feel like the age group this was made for could watch it okay, and even get a self-reflecting, it'll be a corny journey out of it. And people that grew up with it can kind of look back and laugh at, oh yeah, the wig is supposed to fool everybody. Oh yeah, everyone at this concert at the end is supposed to just be quiet and not reveal her secret. I guess after seeing so many horrible movies about bands based around kids like Cheetah Girls and the Camp Rock movies, I don't really see this as that offensive. If you don't like Hannah Montana and you're looking for things wrong with it, you'll get a buttload. But if you're a kid and like the show, or even nostalgic and want to take a happy look back, this is a fond enough memory. Every Winnie the Pooh character got their own movie. Tigger, Piglet, Christopher Robin, even the goddamn Heffalump somehow got its own movie. They had to actually make 2 movies called Winnie the Pooh just to remind you who the main character is. Well, nevertheless, we're gonna look at the Tigger movie today. The bouncy charming character that gives us an almost bouncy charming movie. Tigger, as you probably would have guessed, is bouncing all throughout the 100-acre wood, kind of annoying his friends, but kind of delighting his friends. But one day he realizes being the only one can be, well, kind of lonely. So he decides to look for more Tiggers, and after talking to Owl, he says that he has to find his family tree. He takes this quite literally and goes searching through the woods to find an actual family tree. Roo joins him, as well as his other friends, but quickly they figure out there is no tree to be found. Feeling bad, Roo decides to get everybody together to write him a letter from his family. A family of Tiggers that doesn't exist, but still show their support. Tigger gets so excited at this letter and somehow confuses that they're going to come over the following day. This of course puts his friends in a predicament, and they have to figure out whether or not they tell Tigger that the family isn't real, or they have to pretend to be his family. You can guess which one they pick. Okay, so this movie is not particularly strong in story, but none of the Winnie the Pooh movies are supposed to be. They're supposed to be simple in story, but emotionally heavy. The problems and dilemmas are not the big focus. The big focus is how it impacts the characters and how they work off each other and how their different personalities can, for lack of a better way of putting it, bounce off each other. And for the most part, we get that. along with some really great animation that not only surprisingly does the facial expressions very emotionally, I mean there's only 2 dot eyes and yet somehow they get across so much emotion, but also in that old school sketchiness. You kind of look at the line work and it looks like something almost out of the book. Look at all the lines on Tigger. No 2 stripes are the same, they're all so sketchy and seem so alive somehow. The backgrounds are also phenomenal. I watched this in fall and I'm so glad I did because this takes place in fall and winter. And good lord, they're so gorgeous. It's a different kind of Disney background that you don't really see at that time when they were doing animated movies. Maybe you saw a little bit in Lilo and Stitch with the watercolor, but you never saw this kind of style. It's very simple, but very beautiful and very atmospheric, which is what I think Winnie the Pooh is. Things start to go downhill, both figuratively and literally, in the 3rd act. I won't go too much into spoilers, but as you would probably guess, this is a liar-revealed story where somebody keeps a secret from somebody to keep them happy, but then the person finds out, they get really angry, can't accept that the people were doing it for a good reason, can only see that they lied, and then they go and try to get into even more trouble or do something really stupid, and the friends have to go and help, and somewhere there's an understanding about how everybody is happy again. It's so rare that these stories work because they rarely add anything else. That's the drama that we've seen a million times and is tired and cliche, and sadly, this is kind of the same thing. Not only boring and cliche, but it does stuff I feel like the Winnie the Pooh universe doesn't really do. The climax of the movie, yeah, there's a climax, problem number 1, has to deal with them outrunning an avalanche and not falling off a cliff. The original ends with them just walking across a creek. That's more what these stories were about, not how we gonna get off of this rock while we're falling to our deaths. It just feels so phony and forced. Almost as forced as Jerry Springer references and Marilyn Monroe references, and yeah, sometimes they really miss the mark with this. But for at least 2/3 of the movie, they're right on target. They once again bring back the Sherman Brothers to do the songs, and they're fantastic. Well, most of them. There's a bluesy one that's a little weird, but the others are hummable, have brilliant lyrics, and they're just, it's the Sherman Brothers. I just love hearing their stuff. The characters as well are still incredibly charming too. I don't know why they've never botched up these characters. Winnie the Pooh is still Winnie the Pooh, Tigger is still Tigger, Piglet is still Piglet. Maybe because the idea is to keep them so simple, they don't really need to add that much, and that's exactly what they do. They just let them be themselves, and they are just so likable. Which just makes it all the more shameful when you see it works to such a cliche climax. Even the message of the movie you can figure out very early on, and yet it still waits until the very end to reveal it. But again, I really have to give credit to the things it did right. You never do see the Tigger family, which I think would have been a mistake. They do still keep the majority of it very simple, and they still nail these characters perfectly. So yeah, if you're looking for something that's not especially big and epic, except when it tries to be big and epic and that comes across as kind of awkward, this is a very nice, charming, simple movie, which is what I think most people are looking for when they see a Winnie the Pooh movie. I don't think it's among one of the greater Winnie the Pooh movies, but I still think it's worth checking out. Bounce on in and take a look. The Guardians of the Galaxy movies are interesting because everyone has that one that they absolutely adore and another one that they think is okay. Some adore the first one, think the sequel's okay, some adore the second and think the first one's okay. Me, I'm a Volume 2 kind of guy. I absolutely love this movie's sense of humor, its drama, its visuals, its effects, its characters, its pacing, its themes. I just fell in love with it. Our team of space outcasts are back fighting all sorts of monsters and weird creatures and always on the run, but when trying to find a place to hide out, they come across a celestial named Ego, played by Kurt Russell. Russell, it's revealed, is Star-Lord's father. Yeah, I guess you can't expect a guy like this to have normal parents. His abilities are pretty much that of a god. He can create worlds from nothing. He can also destroy them with nothing, which suggests a very large threat, but the guy seems pretty nice. He gives them all a place to stay, he's a jokester, he's kind, but part of these situations, something just doesn't seem right. Nobody can put their finger on it, but there just seems to be something a little off. Everybody except, of course, Star-Lord, who just loves that he's found his actual dad and he's discovering who he is, where he came from, and what he's gonna do next. But meanwhile, the guy who raised Star-Lord, Yondu, played again by Michael Rooker, is in the middle of a mutiny with his crew taking over his ship and even capturing Groot and Rocket. While they desperately try to escape and even form a little bit of a bond, Star-Lord desperately tries to form a bond and maybe thinks about trying to escape. It's one of those setups I love where you feel like a prisoner, but you can never actually say you are. You can go at any time. It doesn't seem like you're really being threatened, yet somehow it feels like you're being held against your will. Of course, secrets are discovered, betrayals are made, jokes are had, and giant intergalactic battles involving Pac-Man appear. Because that shit can work in a movie like this. What drew me the most to this film is not only that the sense of humor seemed to really be upped. I mean, the first film was very funny, but this one seemed especially funny. But the drama really seemed upped too. A lot of the movie is just kind of taking it easy in these incredible environments and really letting them sink in. I really like films where the visuals kind of tell you the story. The background is almost as big a character. One of my favorite scenes is a really quiet moment where Gamora is just sitting in this field and then suddenly the ship comes down and attacks and it's her sibling and they try shooting at each other and blowing each other up. But then they both kind of get tired, they talk with one another and they make amends like siblings do. It's crazy and over the top, yet somehow it feels kind of real. The emotions are all there and they don't need to be talked about, they just need to be explored. You can learn just as much about a character with a few choice words and just seeing them walk alone than you can with paragraphs and paragraphs of dialogue. With that said, there are a few things that don't quite add up. For example, I love Michael Rooker in this film. I mean, he's just a great character in this, but then there's kind of this connection that he was always his dad and he raised Star-Lord, but I don't know, the first film did not make that connection very strongly. I know they say like he was hard on him because he cared about him, but it feels like they're retconning the last film to kind of make this comparison work. But honestly, it's okay because it's done so well in this film. I love the way all these relations work off each other, and they're all so unique and they're so well defined. Where in the first movie, a lot of the drama seemed to just be at the beginning, a little bit in the middle, and then a little bit at the end, and they just kind of came out of nowhere. Here, it seems balanced perfectly. They can go from one funny moment to an incredibly heartbreaking moment in just a millisecond. That way, a gigantic battle between a father and son, god and human, can easily be interrupted by just showing Groot how to push a button. They both work, match up beautifully, and you care for everybody. Even the ending scene, which I won't give away, I'm not gonna lie, I got a little teary-eyed at. Somehow this movie was working its magic without me even realizing it, to a point where when a character disappeared, I felt really bad. I felt as emotional as the characters in the film did. And a lot of that is because we do like these characters, and we do understand where they're coming from, and they're strange, and they're weird, and they're outcasts, and they're goofy, but we can relate to all of it. If I have one gripe, it's that the ending does go on a little too long, and maybe they're making up for the fact that a lot of the action was saved for the end, and there's only bits and pieces in the rest of the film. Like I said, it is a lot of walking around and talking. So I guess they felt they had to make up for lost punching time and just throw it all in the third act. But still, that action is amazing, and it's so incredible to watch, and you're 100% on the character's side. You want to see them work through what they're working through. You want to see them make connections. You want to see them win. You want to see them succeed. So yeah, I can't say if you like the first one, you're gonna love the second one, because I know a lot of people that love the first one think the second one's only okay. But I also know a lot of people that think the first one's okay like me and absolutely adore the second one. I don't know what it is, but each film has something unique that connects with a lot of people. So whether you want to shoot a blaster or shed a tear, this is a movie that definitely takes you to the stars. So when I reviewed the Disney Channel original movies, a lot of people were saying, "You forgot the Phantom of the Megaplex! How could you forget Phantom of the Megaplex?" I was trying to think if I even remembered the title, and for some reason I was thinking it was an Are You Afraid of the Dark episode. After finally sitting down and watching the movie, I can kinda see why. This film is definitely targeted at little kids. Everything is over the top, everything is overacted, everything is super goofy. There's virtually nothing in it for adults, but I'll admit, if I was a little kid, I think I would probably like this. The film centers around the Megaplex and the colorful characters that work there. As it turns out, there's gonna be a big movie premiere that everybody has to get ready for. The colorful cast of characters with extreme personalities all have to somehow work together to make it a success, but there's apparently a phantom. They think it's more of a legend whenever little things go wrong around the theater. But the night of the premiere, even more things are going wrong, and everyone's afraid it's gonna sabotage the big night. So it's up to our crew of silly troublemakers to try and figure out who the Phantom is and how to stop him. On the one hand, I kinda like this idea. There's something about movie theaters that always feel a little mysterious and even kinda magical. I can't explain it. People who work there often have a lot of interesting stories, and they usually have a love for film as well. And this movie, for as over the top as it is, seems to capture that. My favorite thing, believe it or not, is Mickey Rooney as an old guy who thinks he works there. At first he just seems like a crazy old kook who won't go away, but the more you listen to him, the more you realize how totally sucked in and intrigued he is by films. He constantly talks about how magical they are and how they take you to distant lands. It's so corny and so cheesy, but the way he says a lot of this dialogue, I do find myself kind of enjoying it. There's a legit passion to his performance, and maybe some of that does come from the fact that it is Mickey Rooney playing him. He was one of the biggest stars in the world, and he does have all this history. Nothing about his performance ever feels phoned in. It really seems like he just gets teleported somewhere incredible whenever he talks about film. To a point where he even stops people from seeing bad movies and won't let them in and directs them to better ones. It's so ridiculous, but it's so naive and innocent, you kinda gotta love it. That's probably the best way to describe this film too, naive and innocent. It's one of those movies where you pick up right away what kind of audience they're trying to hit. It's for little kids, and they act big for little kids, and they go really goofy for little kids, and they make up these weird lines for little kids, and again, for a little kids movie that has to entirely take place in a movie theater, which isn't exactly the most exciting place for a kid's movie, I do get why it's this over the top. So is there anything in it for grown-ups? No. Is there anything in it for older kids? No. Will it last the test of time? It already isn't. But I can't really get angry at it for doing exactly what it's doing, being a kid's film about a movie theater with a creepy little phantom. There's always a feeling that it's trying with the creativity. I mean, everything that the Phantom sabotages somehow ties into a movie, like in a tornado movie he turns the air up, in a movie about water he turns on the sprinklers and so forth. The climax even centers around him putting this giant Godzilla balloon inside a theater, and one of the kids has to grab a sword prop from a movie called Merlin on Mars and go after it, like a knight attacking a dragon. It's so childlike and ridiculous, it's kind of adorable. So do I recommend it? Only to little kids. I think they're the only ones that'll really get into it, and hey, it's kind of teaching them that movies are really cool and they can really spark a lot of magical things, and that's a good thing to teach kids. I say for everyone else it's a definite pass, but it's an understandable pass. It's childish, it's silly, but that's just what some kids' movies are supposed to be. Teacher's Pet is based on the Disney show that ran in the early 2000s starring Nathan Lane. I didn't even know it existed, but apparently it was popular enough to make a movie that apparently bombed at the box office, and I can kinda see why? Not to say the movie's bad, I actually don't think it is, but oh man, what a trip! It opens with a dog named Spot, voiced by Nathan Lane, who lives with a boy named Leonard, and apparently he's smart enough to go to school, so he disguises himself as a boy to go and educate himself and have all sorts of fun. But the problem is Spot actually does want to be a boy. Thus, he hears about a doctor, voiced by Kelsey Grammer, who's conducting experiments to turn animals into people. Spot gets excited and convinces Leonard and his mother to go on a road trip to take him there. Seeing how school's out, and every one of these Disney TV shows turned into movies always seems to open with school being out, and they drive themselves all the way down to Florida. But two of Spot's friends do more research and find out that the experiments don't work, and thus they rush down there as quickly as possible to let him know. But the experiment has already happened, and it seems to be a success, but there's only one problem. In dog year, Spot isn't a boy, he's a man. So now he has to walk around as a human man trying to be a human man. Yeah, this is really, really odd. I guess the story is kind of general little kid TV show movie stuff, but the attitude, pacing, and humor is beyond bizarre. The design of the characters I describe as beautifully ugly. There isn't one good-looking character in this, but at the same time, it's kind of fun how weird and distorted they look. I swear they're done by the same person who did the Airborne designs. The humor seems to match it. I can't really say it's cynical, I can't really say it's optimistic, it's just energized, strange, constantly yelling, constantly getting in your face, constantly throwing everything they can at you, and for the most part it is kind of entertaining. This style of humor is so in its own world, it's kind of hard not to get sucked into it and want to have fun right along with them. The Doctor, for example, gets so excited at one point he just rips his head off. Yeah, that's just something that can happen in this world. People can fall to pieces or explode, or their skin can rip apart from their body, but a split second later they're back to normal. It's kind of typical cartoon stuff, but the more I think about it, I don't see that much typical cartoon stuff in movies. We never got a Ren and Stimpy big screen movie, we never got a Tiny Toons big screen movie. The typical cartoony slapstick stuff we don't usually see in theaters. At least, not to this extent. On the one hand, it's kinda nice. I don't always know where it's going, I don't always know what kind of joke is coming next. Most Disney films have, 4 to 5 songs in them? This one has something like 10 to 15. Every other second they're singing and they're just throwing their all into it. Just every single moment they're trying to do something crazy. The one downside is, it can get old after a while. The film doesn't take that many breaks from its weird, kooky sense of humor, and when it does, there's not a ton of emotion to keep you interested. Because of that, I can see this film very easily annoying some people. For me, it was alright, but even I'll admit I was starting to get a little tired of it. Thankfully, the humor for me was so energized and weird that I didn't mind too much, but I can see people getting really sick of it really fast. Nothing about it seems particularly cinematic, it just seems like a really long cartoon. But some people want to see really long cartoons. I love cartoons, and so I kinda like this. Its weird shapes and colors mixed with weird ideas and characters, I can't help it. I thought it was bizarrely kind of fun. Did it get grating sometimes? Once in a while. But at the same time, I have to give them credit for just going all the way. It never lets up. It's always trying to do something insane. And I guess the kind of insane part of me weirdly appreciates it. It's still smart, it's still well thought out. Just because it's silly doesn't mean it's not done by people who are extremely talented. I guess fans of the show will really enjoy it. I mean, I have to assume the show was just as crazy. To any newcomers though, just keep in mind it is pretty relentless. It just constantly throws crazy thing after crazy thing with somehow a kid-related moral attached to it. To some that can definitely be a turnoff, but for me, it's the right amount of madness for a solid view. Well, here it is, the first Star Wars movie to not make money, Solo. Now to its credit, it's not entirely the final product's fault. This was the most expensive Star Wars film because, well, everything was reshot. Originally they had 2 different directors making it, but they didn't like the direction it was going, so they switched them out with Ron Howard. But they were already deep in production, which meant there was a lot of reshoots. And sadly, as the box office showed, it didn't pay off. But even taking that equation out of it, Solo is very so-so. Of all the characters I feel like I'd be interested in knowing the backstory to, Solo, oddly enough, is not one that I found out a lot of people really needed to know about. He seems self-explanatory. You saw him, you felt like you already know his story. But it turns out you didn't, and this film is gonna make you wish you didn't. Solo starts out as a young thief with a girlfriend who steals all sorts of goods for this giant centipede muppet. It's a little weird. But he decides he wants to do something with his life, so he takes his girlfriend and they try to escape the Empire. They get separated though, with her staying behind and him leaving the planet. With a brand new name too.
Solo.
Who needed the origin of that? Oh, and by the way, the Empire theme, that's totally used in their commercials. Now whenever the Emperor lands in Return of the Jedi, I just want to see a little marching band playing that theme the whole time. That's so weird. Anywho, Solo goes from adventure to adventure, from different group of rogues to other different groups of rogues that I guess are always smuggling, but they're always smuggling from either the Empire or some bad group that he's not really a bad guy, he's not really much of an outlaw. It's like how Bruce Wayne was never really a criminal because he only stole from himself. God, you lame-ass fucking cheaters, just make him a bad guy! Anyway, he meets up with a giant creature named Chewie, who we discover eats people. Well, I guess if Ewoks can do it, why not Wookiees? And his whole focus is to go from job to job to get back to the planet to meet up with his fair love. Oh, there she is! Huh, not even halfway through the movie and he just kind of found her. They're not even really that impressed to see one another. Now that you completely robbed the motivation from this movie, where do we go from here? Well, oddly enough, the rest of the flick just kind of feels like they're trying to find their motivation. Like, he's trying to figure out what she's up to, and she's trying to figure out what this other group of bad guys are up to, or are they bad guys? And even when you do find out, it's kind of even more confusing, tying into, like, the animated Star Wars movies that you have to have seen to follow this. On top of it being all over the place without something to really focus on to lead us through it, the different worlds in this movie are just kind of ugly. I remember them being very brown and smoky, and you can't see a lot of them. Sometimes that works out well, like when he meets Lando, I want him to meet in like a dark, scuzzy, bar-like place. But when he's going through the Kessel Run, which I'll admit is kind of cool to see exactly how he made that speed, it looks like it's through a tornado's butthole. It's just so unappealing to look at. Sometimes there can be an occasional good shot, and again, if it's like during a war or something that's supposed to kind of look like World War I, I'm okay with that. They're trying to do an homage. But the whole film looks like this. Rogue One could look dark and gritty too, but you could still see it. It still had a visual sense. You felt like you were there. Here, it just feels like someone's blowing smoke in your face the whole time. Why do I want to see that in a Star Wars film? The acting, for the most part, I remember being okay, and the effects, I remember being okay. But like I said, the motivation and the focus just didn't seem there. And even when he does do smuggling stuff, it's never actual smuggling. At least, not outlaw smuggling, it's going against the Empire or these other bad guys, and that's not what I imagined for Han Solo. I remember him being an actual rogue. That's why it made it interesting when he joins the rebellion. But nope, that would make him too much of a bad guy, and that's too much of a complicated idea, so we just always have to make him good. But honestly, that'd be small potatoes if I just cared at all, and I didn't. I don't need every Star Wars story to be epic, they can be small. Hell, I actually really like that cantina scene from the holiday special. That was great, and it had no epicness in it at all. I loved it. I heard they were gonna do a movie on Mos Eisley. I would totally be down for that. But here, it feels like it's trying to be a small story and a big story at the same time, and because of that, they can't really keep it focused. It's just another movie. It doesn't even really feel like Star Wars. It just feels like this sci-fi flick about this guy that kind of goes from thing to thing and then it's over. Even the people who like it say they enjoy it, but they kind of forget about it shortly after. I guess that's not the biggest crime. But for something like Star Wars, whether it be incredibly good or incredibly bad, there has to be something incredible about it. And there's definitely nothing like that here. Okay, I see how it works. When I don't like Thor the Dark World, it's, oh, you don't understand Thor! Natalie Portman and Kat Dennings are amazing! Oh, you just don't get it! But then when Thor Ragnarok comes around, it's, oh, we finally got a good Thor movie! Oh, no Natalie Portman or Kat Dennings! Oh, they finally understand! Blow me, you symbolic voice I've decided to clump all of the internet I don't like into! Anyway, Thor Ragnarok is a funny, big, epic, action-packed fun time. It's not especially deep or very meaningful, but it finally gives us a story and visuals that look on par with what Thor was, or at the very least, an 80s rock cover, which is what Thor should be, damn it! After returning from a giant mission, Thor discovers that Loki, his brother, has disguised himself as Odin and he forces him to change back. When he demands Loki to take him to his real father, they find he doesn't have much time left. In a quick change of tone that's surprisingly effective, we see him slowly fade away while also giving information about their actual firstborn. Hela, the banished rightful heir, is going to come and reclaim her throne the minute he dies. And seeing how he told them this the minute he died, they don't have much time to prepare and she comes and attacks. She and her army banish Thor and Loki to another realm where they're used as entertainment, a part of the galaxy of gladiators, media, bounty hunters, and Jeff Goldblum, because somehow strangely this movie feels naked without him. Thor is captured to fight for ruler Goldblum's amusement, and wouldn't you know it, one of the other captured gladiators is the Hulk. The problem is though, the Hulk has stayed the Hulk for a long time. He hasn't turned back human in quite a while. So Thor has a lot on his plate. He has to turn the Hulk back to himself, escape, defeat his sister, and also stop Ragnarok, the destruction of his entire kingdom. So that's quite a lot to throw at you in one movie, and smartly the film doesn't take it too seriously. Sometimes that can be a problem, as there's an occasional joke that almost doesn't feel very Thor-like, but we're used to that from the other Thor movies. Honestly, here I almost argue it's downplayed. That's not to say the film doesn't have some dramatic moments, it's just not especially dramatic. It's just enough so that we want to be on their side when they're flying around, throwing swords and breathing fire and doing all the cool stuff we want to see in a Thor movie. The laughs make us enjoy them more. The effects show the cool things they can do while they're making us laugh. So when we get to the really big action sequences, we're entirely on board. It's not Lord of the Rings or Lawrence of Arabia, but I don't think it's really meant to be. It's supposed to be a comic book movie. A comic book movie of gods fighting each other and blowing shit up and saying cool one-liners. At the center of it are the incredibly charming characters. The one good thing in every single Thor movie is always Thor himself. Chris Hemsworth is just so charming, whether he has to be funny, whether he has to be badass, whether he has to be big, whether he has to be subtle, he works for whatever's needed. It's also great to see Eric Bana focused on. I feel like this is the Hulk movie we also really deserved but never got. It's interesting that he would actually want to stay the Hulk for a long time, like he chose to do so. And when he doesn't want to change back into the Hulk again, he's constantly surrounded by people who glorify it. They praise the monster, they praise the violence, which is actually kind of an interesting commentary when you think about it. He's trying to run away from being the awful beast in a world where everybody wants him to be the awful beast. You could almost argue that's the Hulk's complicated movie history in a nutshell. I also like this drunk bounty hunter who's got a real tragic backstory, but still gets a lot of good laughs as well. The only problem I have is she's supposed to be a literal fall-down drunk. Why does she always look that good? Shouldn't her hair be a little messed up or a little sloppy? If you can't even stand, how do you get your eyeliner that perfect? I guess I shouldn't talk when you see Cate Blanchett throughout this entire picture. Good God. This design is crazy, and her acting totally backs it. It's big, it's loud, it's intense, it's totally having fun with every moment. I guess if I had any criticism, it would have been that the film could have been cut down by a good 15-20 minutes. It didn't need to be this long. I also argue that maybe a little bit more drama would have been welcomed, but I am still happy with what we got, especially compared with the other two. Thor Ragnarok is a big, goofy movie in all the right ways. It's got the charm, it's got the action, it's got the cool effects. It's my definition of a good popcorn movie. It's just enough to get invested, but you don't have to think too hard about it either. It's just stupid fun that took a lot of smart planning to accomplish. Cross the rainbow bridge and enjoy your hammer time. Well, this sucked. Planes. The spin-off film in the apparent cinematic universe created from Pixar's Cars. Either that or it's a cinematic universe around planes, trains, and automobiles, just missing the trains part. Lord knows I drop as many F-bombs while watching it. If you've seen my past reviews, you know I'm not the biggest fan of the Cars movies, but God, after seeing this one, I may have to rethink it because Christ! It is the most obvious commercial, generic, bland piece of crap that Disney could put out. The story? Pfft, forget it. I can just tell you the first sentence and you can predict everything that's going to happen. Let's try it. A crop duster named Dusty wants to enter a race. There, don't you know everything that's gonna happen after I say that? He's gonna be a screw-up, he's gonna be an underdog, but he finds this old wise mentor who's gonna teach him the ways, but he has a tragic past, but we don't get to that yet. We're gonna get to that later in some sort of big reveal. We find out that Dusty has a fault that should make him incapable of racing. In this case, he's afraid of heights. I know that's already confusing because he's a goddamn plane. He's already high off the ground, but this is like really high off the ground. Yeah, it's so stupid. But he enters the race with a whole bunch of colorful characters, and of course, there's a big shot bully who's always the winner, but as the underdog starts to climb up, he sabotages him cheating, and of course, at the end, it's really close. An Adam Sandler sports movie would have more originality than this. I guess you could say I expect more out of Pixar, but it's not even a Pixar movie. Yeah, their name isn't on it. John Lasseter produced it and helped with the story, but it's technically just a Disney product, despite it clearly taking place in the Cars universe. But okay, there's been more cliche generic stories out there that have been turned into something really cool. I have no idea why I mentioned that because this clearly isn't one of those movies. I guess some of the bare essentials are there, like the acting's okay, it's bright, it's colorful. But these characters in almost no way seem alive. By God, I hate referencing something good about Cars, but when you see them moving, when you see them talking, when you see them going through emotions, it looks like they're going through these emotions. They kind of shrug and shift, and if they're sad, they'll kind of move sad. If they're happy, they'll kind of move happy. Here, they just look like toys. Dead, lifeless toys that somehow ate celebrities and their voices are coming out of them. Where in Cars, they move like characters, here, they move like planes. You're just looking at planes flying around, circling around, moving. Even the distance between the eyes and the mouth creates a separation. They're just so far apart from each other that it's hard to be like, yeah, I'm getting legit emotion out of these characters. And you could be like, well, who cares? It's just a kid's film. You're not supposed to get much emotion. But get this. One of the characters has a backstory that has a lot of death in it. Yeah, like he leads an entire squad to their deaths. They're burning alive and exploding and going into the water, and this dramatic music is playing. Planes! Goddamn planes! Yeah! Planes is gonna make you cry? I guess? Look at this shit! Are these the kind of designs you would expect to get like emotion out of? No! Clearly not! Even Cars 3 with that ridiculously serious trailer didn't go this serious. What the hell were these filmmakers thinking? But alright, maybe we can overlook that if there's a lot of comedy in this. I mean, there's a lot of comedic potential with planes and a plane universe. What do we got here? Oh look, they're on the USS Fleisenhauer. Fleisenhauer! I'm sorry, I just had to let that sink in. Fleisenhauer. Because the word fly is in it, and they're planes. Disney! You know what makes it even creepier? The Fleisenhauer is apparently alive too. Look, it has eyes. There's probably a mouth underwater that can't talk. You just get bubbles and shit. Any second, I just want to flip all those stupid cars and planes over and be like, I'm a man. I'm a human being. Fuck this world. This is insane. Yeah, I guess on top of everything else, it's just kind of creepy looking at these things. Like when one stalls, it just goes into the water. I'm like, how do they swim? I guess they don't, because you can't really move the wings. They're just kind of these dead planes that have eyes on them. So, it's just disturbing watching them. I don't like it. It's unpleasant. Just no. No. The amount of laziness in the storytelling and design is just amazing. You can't believe this came from Disney. Now, with Pixar, I mean, okay, I guess Pixar kind of ripped off from Disney and Disney kind of ripped off from Pixar. Actually, it's kind of a weird back and forth they have going, but still, this movie is awful. The tone doesn't work, the jokes don't work, it's visually boring, and it's a bad idea that's a spin-off of another bad idea. I guess if you have little kids, they can probably watch it okay, though again, the kind of big mass slaughter in the middle might throw them off a bit. It's just a waste. It's a waste of great animators, it's a waste of good storytellers, it's a waste of a good cast. It probably goes without saying, but fly the hell away from this one as quickly as you can. Frankenweenie is not a particularly exciting movie, but it is a particularly weird movie. The right kind of weird, the weird I really enjoy. A satire, obviously, of the classic Frankenstein, but also kind of its own strange thing with its own weird sense of humor in this beautiful looking stop motion world. Young Victor Frankenstein and his dog are the best of friends. He hangs out with him, plays baseball with him, they even make, get this, stop-motion films together. Wow, I'm trying to think if I've ever seen a stop-motion character watch a stop-motion film before. It's a little surreal. The dog is sadly hit by a car and they have to bury him, but Victor hears about the power of electricity and what it can do. He decides to run an experiment to see if he can use lightning to bring his dog back to life, and, of course, that's exactly what happens. But with the science fair coming up, some of the other kids think that he might have an unfair advantage. I mean, cheating death is rather impressive. So a slew of colorful characters decide they're gonna do the same thing, and thus, all sorts of weird monster animals start running amok throughout the neighborhood. Will Victor and his dog save the day while also getting his homework done on time? Yeah, it's that kind of film, and honestly, that's what I expected, and I'm glad I got. It's funny because the way films like this usually work is that they start off as animated shorts and then they're turned into live-action full-length films. Here, it started off as a live-action short and was turned into an animated full-motion picture. However it happened, it turned out a very charming, albeit not particularly surprising film. This movie mainly exists to show off a bunch of very strange and colorful characters. Colorful in that, I mean, it's black and white, but you know what I mean. The designs on all of them are fantastic, and their personalities match just how strange they look. There's a girl whose cats poop omens, there's a hunchback boy whose smile never seems to leave his face, there's a creepy scientist who constantly insults how stupid everybody is, and most of the film is just watching them interact off each other. For some, this might be seen as too boring, and I'd be lying if I said I didn't understand, but for me, these people are just so odd and so weird looking and so eccentric that I just adored it. It's funny that I missed this one when it came out. I think I was just kind of riding that Tim Burton low where he was just kind of turning out mediocre project after mediocre project, and I just thought this might be another one. But I was surprised at how much I enjoyed it. Even the designs really lend themselves to the tone of the film. When I saw Corpse Bride, though I thought it was okay, I didn't think that the facial expressions really lent themselves to the songs and the emotions. They seem to all have just one expression, and in a story like that, you need much more of a variety. Here, those blank, strange expressions are perfect. It's kind of like Bob's Burgers. They're just such odd people that you enjoy seeing them have little to no reaction while they're doing incredibly weird things. If anything, it makes a lot of the comedy funnier. Is it a spectacular story or a spectacular feat of animation? Not really. I can't even say I laughed that hard throughout the majority of it. But it's just the right amount of that bizarre atmosphere that I can't help but really enjoy. I don't know, it's the little kid in me that still enjoys old-fashioned Halloween movies and shorts and so forth. Ones that love paying homage to classic monsters but are kinda doing their own unique thing as well. I don't recall any Frankenstein movie ending with a cat and bat getting zapped by lightning and turning into a weird hybrid. But in this movie you just kinda say, of course that would happen. It's probably not for everyone, but if you have even the tiniest interest in seeing this, check it out. It'll make your imagination come alive. I don't think I've ever seen a Disney Channel movie I was more ready to like than Don't Look Under the Bed. From its Sam Raimi style POV shots, from its cool shadow work, to the fact that the main character is named Francis Bacon. Good lord, I am gonna fall in love with this! But the more the movie continued, the more bizarre it got and kinda the more awkward it got. That's not to say there isn't a lot of cool stuff about it, but there's also a lot of dumb stuff about it. And in the end, it's kind of a mess. A teenage girl named Frances Bacon, God, it feels so weird to say. It skipped ahead a grade in school, and the only reason I bring that up is because the movie brought it up. It actually doesn't play much into anything. But what does is all sorts of weird things are happening around the area. Clocks are being set forward, cars are being egged, and even people are stopping directly in their tracks in silence. It's actually kind of the most eerie part of the movie because there's no goofy music, no silly acting, it's just quiet. For a Disney Channel movie, that's pretty eerie. Things get even stranger when Frances starts to see a boy named Larry Houdini, but nobody else seems to. Nobody knows what seems to be going on in town, but Frances is instantly being blamed. Mostly because graffiti of the letter B is everywhere except on her locker. That is, it's on the inside of her locker, where only she could get to it. Other things like the swimming pool being filled with jello, I love that, and all the jello from her house being gone start to add up and start to get people pointing fingers at her. The more and more she gets blamed for, the more and more she sees that Larry Houdini kid. So she finally confronts him and he admits he's an imaginary friend. Well, not her imaginary friend, just an imaginary friend in general. Kids can apparently see him, but grown-ups can't. His theory is that all these pranks are being caused by the boogeyman. Somebody who used to be an imaginary friend, but when somebody stops believing, they turn into an evil force. So it's up to Frances and Larry to figure out if the boogeyman is real, how they stop him, and more important, how to get her kid brother back, who's kidnapped in the third act. By a giant sock that he can't get out of and she can't get him out of. Oh, he also uses a spider web net that looks like the easiest thing to get out of, and yet she can't get out of that either. Oh, and the little brother had leukemia, and he got better because the other brother gave him some of his bone marrow. If that sounds like an afterthought, it's because the film kind of treats it that way too. Leukemia? Really? I mean, you can tackle this if you want, but you never see the kid in the hospital. You never hear the kid talk about it. Every once in a while, someone just brings it up as if that's why the kid doesn't see imaginary friends anymore. Well, okay, if you're gonna just name drop leukemia like that, you don't really have it as a side thing, you have it as a little bit more of a focus. I mean, it's freaking leukemia in a Disney Channel movie. But sadly, a lot of it is just Larry trying to convince Frances that he's real, and the boogeyman is real, and imaginary friends are real, and for whatever reason, she never believes it. Even though he proves it over and over and over, she still doesn't catch on, and it's so infuriating. On top of that, their acting is kind of one note. At first they seem okay, Frances is obsessed with logic and proving things, so it makes sense that she wouldn't believe there's an imaginary friend. But even at the end when her brother is about to be thrown off a cliff, she still keeps that cynical delivery. Come on, show a little bit more emotion! Larry gets pretty annoying too. At first I kinda dug the fact that he was kinda wild and weird because nobody saw him except kids, so he would kinda be this way. But a little of him goes really far, and after a while it doesn't feel like he's being very natural, like this is just what this character is like. It feels like he's always trying to get a laugh, and it's usually not working. The times I like him best is when he has to talk serious because his delivery is still so strange, but it's still kinda unique. I actually kinda dug it. And if I was a kid, yeah, maybe I'd get more into his goofy stuff. There's kind of a young Jim Carrey wannabe style in there. But as an adult, it gets really old really quick, and it would have been nicer if they had something that both kids and adults could have a lot of fun with. All the other characters are a little off too, and not really in a charming way, just kind of a weird way. The father, for example, I don't know what his deal is. He always kind of seems angry, or maybe not, maybe he's just kind of weird. I can't really figure him out. So okay, it seems like I'm crapping on this movie a lot, but to its credit, there is a lot of cool stuff as well. Visually, it's a lot of fun. The angles in this are just so cool. A lot of them are kind of slanted and moving around and warped and weird. Some scenes in this I think would be legitimately scary to little kids. It even got a little bit of a creep factor out of me. When Larry gets angry, his eyes suddenly go purple and green and his voice changes and it comes right out of nowhere. I was actually kind of hoping maybe he was going to be the villain, but it doesn't go that angle. The angle it does go is kind of clever with a twist behind who the actual boogeyman is, but even then I don't entirely follow it, so there's just other boogeymens that come from other imaginary friends? I mean, a lot of people don't believe in imaginary friends after a while, in fact most people, and what? Those are all the pranks that happen in the world? Maybe? Why is it just this one imaginary friend that turns into a boogeyman that's wreaking havoc in the town? Shouldn't there be like a ton of these boogeymen? But like I said, every time it doesn't make sense or it gets really boring trying to convince her that boogeymen are real and everything, they do something kind of cool. For example, when they do finally go under the bed, there's this giant weird kingdom, and just look at this set, look at these designs, these are really neat. I also love the idea of how she gets to this world. Look, it seems like she's climbing under the bed, but suddenly she's climbing up a mountain in the exact same shot. That's really clever. But unfortunately, you gotta wait a long time for scenes like that, and you gotta sit through a lot of uncomfortable, awkward moments to get to them. I guess as a kid I would probably like it, though I feel like I would get bored pretty quickly of all the talking and would want to see a lot of the stuff they're talking about. Like I said, every time they bring up that leukemia thing, it's really uncomfortable and odd. It would have gotten the point across so much more if they actually showed a little bit. Maybe it could have opened with that, like the kid in the hospital and the sister feeling bad, and then like, you see in that moment she had to grow up and he had to grow up, just a little something. But we get none of that here. The only bits we do get is an occasional smart line. For example, I like when they're in the garage and Frances said if the brother didn't believe in the imaginary friend anymore, why did he stay? To which Larry said, he still needed me. That's that's actually kind of interesting and can be taken a lot of ways. One of the final lines is also kind of brilliant.
I guess it takes a lot of imagination to become a grown-up.
Again, in a story like this, that's surprisingly profound, and you didn't need much, just a line or two. But like I said, everything is either over-talked or not talked about enough. It's like the focus is always in the wrong place. If I was a kid, I would probably like chunks of it, the darker stuff. I'm sure Larry would probably get a laugh out of me too. But I don't know if I would watch it a lot, as again, I'd have to wait for quite a bit to get to those moments. If you grew up loving it, fair enough, I can see why, I guess. But for me, this clutter under the bed is just a little too messy. So I tried watching the remake of Pete's Dragon a long time ago, and I'm not gonna lie, I turned it off after the first 5 minutes. With the whimsical music and the inspiring stares and people saying lines like,
"See, my daughter, she knows a thing or two, but only if it's staring at her in the face. If you go through life only seeing what's right in front of you, you're gonna miss out on a whole lot."
Oh my god, stop, stupid movie, stop. But a lot of my friends were encouraging me to give it a second chance, so I decided to put it on, watch it all the way through, and yeah, I'm glad they did. Pete's Dragon truly does have some wonderful moments in it, some just okay moments in it, and yeah, like I said before, some pretty bad moments in it. But the bad moments aren't as much as I thought, and I'm still kinda glad I saw it. Pete is a little boy whose parents are just so gall-darn happy that they must die in the next few seconds, up right on cue. And he seems to come across an invisible dragon that makes himself visible, and they form a friendship over the years. As time passes, a ranger discovers him, takes him in, and tries to find out where he came from. Pete is of course a confused wild child, doesn't really remember the civilization that he came from, and naturally has trouble fitting in. But as time goes on, he does learn to lower his defenses and eventually calm down and accept these people as a family. While that's going on though, his dragon, named Elliot, is looking all through the forest and the neighborhoods to find him, and wouldn't you know it, the brother-in-law of the ranger saw the dragon, wants to hunt him down, and blah blah blah, you know the drill. Pete says his dragon is real, his new family doesn't believe him, and at the very end it'll be revealed that he is real, or rather in the middle. Huh, that's interesting. Okay, I'll give credit. They usually do this big reveal at the end, but they're doing it in the middle. Where are they gonna go from here? Oh, this bullshit. So, yeah, it seems like there's almost 3 competing kids movies here. One is the really corny, whimsical, wishy-washy stuff. Another is a very mature, slow-moving, yet interesting story. And the last third is, I don't know, follow that bird? It's just kind of one big chase scene when we could be using this time dedicated to the kid either connecting more to the family or even connecting more to Elliot. It's funny because as much as Pete and Elliot are actually very enjoyable to watch on their own, the boy is very believable and literally hopping from place to place and looking truly lost. And the dragon, while he looks fake, is still very expressive, and without saying any words, he still gets across a lot of character. Nevertheless, they surprisingly don't have a ton of connection. I guess there's a hint at the beginning and a hint at the end, both strangely enough involving looking at the North Star. But aside from that, it's just him flying the dragon around going, yay, wee, woohoo, and that's supposed to be a connection. We've seen that in a million films, and it doesn't really show how their personalities work off each other. Seems like Pete asking Elliot what he's looking at, and Elliot moaning while looking at the star, and Pete puts his head on his belly. Seems like that really work, and there's not much dialogue. But oddly enough, most of the movie they're separated, so we don't really get too much of a connection. I also have to admit I'm disappointed that it's not left open to interpretation whether or not the dragon is real. I mean, they reveal very early on that the hunters are looking for this dragon, they see him, they shoot at him, and like I said, in the middle of the movie the family sees the dragon. How much more interesting would this be if nobody else saw the dragon except the boy? Like there's a scene where the dragon is peeking through the window and the boy is really liking the family, and the dragon feels really sad. How much more interesting would it be if that was left open to the boy's imagination? Like he feels like he's letting another life down subconsciously. This would be so fascinating. But nope, he's just real and people go after him with the guns and he breathes fire at them and they just scream and oh, who gives a shit? There's other little things that get to me too, like Robert Redford is way too all-knowing in this. Like when he sees the dragon, even though he tells everybody he's seen it for years, when he actually sees it with his own eyes, he just goes, magic! And I'm thinking, no, he should be like teary-eyed, he should be dropping to his knees like, my god, there it is, I've been vindicated! Characters like the stepdad are completely pointless. You could have cut this character out and not miss a thing. In fact, you didn't have to have it his brother that's going after the dragon. You could have had that be the stepdad, because he's not really a super villain. He's just kind of a jerky guy that doesn't understand, and at the end, like, yeah, he's okay, he just didn't know. That could have been the father character. It could have connected to bringing their family closer. In fact, all this talk about it's not about what you see, it's about what you feel, it's about what you perceive, and all this stuff about faith and belief. Why didn't they play more into that? Maybe the adults can't see the dragon, or maybe adults that still have a little bit of a childish mind or something. And Pete helps show them that childish mind, but some people are too far gone and can't see it. Something like Polar Express. I don't know. There's so much more you could do with this. But then again, I have to remind myself, I'm saying this about a remake of Pete's Dragon. Yeah, this film. Honestly, I'm kind of impressed with the okay movie that I got. It's different enough that it doesn't feel like it's just a rehash of the original, but it's also following in the vein just enough. A boy lost in the woods finds a dragon, has to get a new family. This is more the vein of remakes I'd like to see Disney attempt. Except, you know, less punch-in-the-face whimsical music and dialogue that sounds very Bridge to Terabithia-y. So I don't know. I guess it is the best of the Disney live-action remakes I've seen, but given the Disney live-action remakes, that's not saying a ton. Still, I'm glad I saw it. I'm glad I saw it for the boy, I'm glad I saw it for some of the other actors, I'm glad I saw it for the dragon, I'm glad I saw it for the ideas they were starting to go with, they just never followed all the way through with them. Nothing great, but okay enough for me to say, check it out. Let's finish up Disneycember with arguably the biggest Marvel movie to date, Avengers: Infinity War. This film has been so built up, it's crazy. And surprisingly enough, it isn't just from the advertising. Since the first Avengers movie where Thanos was revealed, they've been hyping up his appearance in practically every other flick. Thanos is coming, he's gonna be here soon! It got to a point where it was actually comical. To a point where it was almost annoying. People started to say there's no way they're gonna live up to the hype they're building up. We're sick of hearing Thanos is coming, just do something with him already. You know what? Thanos doesn't even look that great, he just looks like a big purple blob monster who's gonna do, I don't know, smile. So even though there was a lot of excitement around this movie, there was a lot of speculation too. But amazingly, the part of the movie everybody thought would be the weakest link is the strongest part. Josh Brolin as Thanos not only looks amazing with this incredible motion capture, but he has to be hands down the best Marvel villain out of any of these movies. After just being teased with snippets of him in the other films, this is entirely his movie. It's his story. Why is he doing this? How is he doing this? What's going through his mind? What does he care about? What's he going to do next? He's actually so interesting the Avengers are almost distracting, and those are incredibly charming characters. The plot, I'll attempt to sum up, there is a ton going on, is that Thanos has taken over Thor and Loki's ship, destroyed everybody on it, which kinda sucks, Thor Ragnarok was kind of for no reason, and even ends up beating the shit out of the Hulk. The Hulk, goddamn! Hulk lands on Earth though and lets him know that Thanos is coming. Thanos sends out his minions to look for the rest of the Infinity Stones. You see, if he gets all the Infinity Stones and puts them on his Infinity Gauntlet, he can fulfill his ultimate goal of wiping out half of humanity. His thought is whenever a population is getting too big, they become too dangerous, so wiping out half of them will bring balance back. It doesn't even matter who they are, it's just half. He did this before with Gamora's people and he actually ended up raising her. She, not surprisingly, resents him quite a bit, and does everything in her power to stop him, but he's just too cunning and too manipulative to be defeated. The more the Avengers try to get together, ironically the more they get split up. The Infinity Stones are spread out far across the galaxy, so that means a lot of them have to go to different places to try and get them. Can they reach them in time and stop Thanos before he wipes out half of the human race? Well, I'm not gonna give away the ending, but prepare for your kids to be scarred for life. The funny thing about Infinity War is that what I usually see as cons in a movie, I actually see as pros in this one. The characters are not given much introduction. There's not even that much sitting down and talking about their feelings or emotions or anything like that. They're just kind of running into the action. But here's the thing, we already know these characters. We've had movie upon movie upon movie finding out about these characters. So when you do see them together, you don't just want Captain America talking about himself or Star-Lord talking about himself. You want to see them interact off each other. And that's exactly what we get. Iron Man and Doctor Strange have been called very similar, so they of course don't get along. Star-Lord and Thor are both cocky fighters, so they obviously try to one-up each other. Spider-Man is always looking for Tony Stark's approval, so they have kind of a father-son relationship. While they're constantly fighting and going from place to place, they are still making connections, and they're using just the right choice words to establish themselves and their relationships as, well, incredibly likable. Even when they don't get along, there's an incredible charm to them. In most action movies, when characters get together and bicker, it feels lame. It's like those stupid buddy cop movies or those dumbass romantic comedies where they just complain the whole time and yet somehow they get along. But here, they're so well set up, you love when they don't get along. They're funny, their quips are wonderful, and you like seeing how they actually do kind of come together. It got to a point where even the smallest cameos got a cheer from everybody because they knew they were gonna be done right. Even if they didn't say much or do much, you knew that was them. They were there, they were interacting with everybody, they were helping out. The universe feels so defined. The only part that drags a little is there's a scene where Thor has to meet up with this giant, played very cleverly by Peter Dinklage. And it's not just because that's a little person playing a big person, it's because his dimensions are different. It isn't just taking an average-sized person and making him bigger. Peter Dinklage has a very distinct, uniquely shaped body. So to make that larger gives a visual and a movement we haven't really seen before out of a giant. But it goes on way too long. Every single time it cut back to him at this weird gate and trying to move all these little technical gadgets around, I just didn't care. Maybe because the action here wasn't very interesting and what they were talking about wasn't very interesting. But everywhere else, the dialogue and the action are fantastic. Again, especially from Thanos. I can't believe how much they won me over with this character. I was so ready to not like the motion capture. Why can't they just do practical effects? I was so ready to be bored by him. Nah, you built him up too long, now we're not interested. But he really was the best part, somehow supplying both the menace and the heart of the movie. What can I say? The wait was worth it. Infinity War is a big movie that has a lot of big effects and a lot of big battles and a lot of big characters and a lot of big story. It's the kind of movie where you want a lot going on. It's the kind of movie where you want a lot of things blowing up and people looking pained and going from one place to another. And it can do that because it's had so many films building up to it. This was a gamble that definitely paid off. Just when you're starting to get tired of the Marvel formula and you're kind of looking for something different, they up their game, like they usually do. They seem to know just when to mix it up a little bit more and exactly how to mix it up, while still seeming familiar. It's the same characters with brand new challenges. And folks, that's it for this year's Disneycember. I know I had a lot to get through and I probably didn't get to everything I wanted to, but keep watching and maybe you'll see them in the near future. As always, Disney for so many years has been pushing the envelope of what's creative, what's important, what's childlike, and what's adult. It's hard to combine all those things in one, but somehow Disney still ends up doing it. As long as they keep putting out a ton of material, I'll always be there to talk about it. And as long as you're always there to view it, I will always consider myself a lucky critic. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you at next year's Disneycember.